Hey friends, welcome to the channel. So here's another interesting story of Deku. What if Deku had temperature manipulating quirk? I have given credits to original author in starting of the video, but if the original author wishes to reclaim copyright or remove this video, I kindly request before giving copyright strike. Please contact us using the information provided in the channel info. We respect and acknowledge authorship rights, and I will delete that specific video by myself. Thank you. Stormbreaker by Knucking Futs. It was a soggy day once more. Izuku? Izuku. But it was just priceless times in the Midoriya household. With an unnecessarily dramatic voice, Midoriya Inko shouted for her young hero while crouched and concealed beneath a blanket. She yelled again, cupping her hands around her mouth. "Come save me, Izuku." Izuku ran into the room, exclaiming, "I am here." He leapt excitedly towards his mother, who delightedly embraced him and twirled him around, laughing uncontrollably. She laughed too, saying, "You're my hero, Izu-kun." Izuku's little heart grew even larger upon hearing his mother say those things. Given his age, he had every right to be disappointed by the dreary weather. He was thrilled when his mother offered to play with him inside, even if it meant he couldn't go outdoors. Even though it was predicted to rain all day, nobody seemed to notice when the ominous clouds began to part. The fact that the sun was shining and the skies were clear only a short while ago, despite the fact that the rain was soaking anybody it could reach, didn't really register with anyone because weather forecasters occasionally made mistakes. Not even the boy realized that Izuku's peculiarity had emerged in that one instant. Nobody truly noticed until he was 4 years old, turning 5 in a few months. All in all, Izuku didn't have a very good memory of it, huh? The cry was accompanied by little explosions. Izuku scowled at his best friend, his eyes wet. "Take it be back, Kachan." "Or what, Deku?" The boy merely gave him a smug look. "As your only friend, I'm just being honest with you." His two other lackeys snickered behind him. Izuku shook his head and forced his eyes tight, ignoring the tears that streamed down his cheeks. He exclaimed, "You're wrong." Katsuki simply gave him a glare. "Am not. Everyone knows Auntie only pretends for your sake. She knows you can never be a hero." Izuku sucked in a breath, tears still streaming down his face. He choked and answered, "No, she said. She said I was her little hero." If anyone saw the dark clouds gathering, they didn't give it much thought. Bakugo was making fun of Izuku right now, but this time the outcome was very different. The younger boy was being tormented by the irascible blonde, but what was unexpected was Izuku's reaction to it. It was the first time they had ever seen him cry so much. Katsuki leaned in and gave him a sharp poke in the chest. She was. Deception. Boom. The sky screamed and the rain started falling as if on cue. Everyone let out a cry as the thunder roared near their tender hearts, and the intense rain nearly hit them. Someone said, "It was sunny just a few minutes ago." Katsuki stood in the center of it, staring up at the sky. What the heck? Izuku was trembling in front of him, sobs coursing through his tiny frame. He was not conscious of the panic that was engulfing him, nor was he particularly troubled by its source. "I hate you." It was those 3 words that roused Katsuki from his daze. What did you say?" Izuku gazed up to meet Katsuki's eyes, still trembling. Though thunder and lightning pursued the lightning above them, Katsuki took a nervous step back for no apparent reason. Izuku had eyes that were trying to give Katsuki his best scowl. 4-year-old Izuku swallowed hard and said, "I don't." Another clap of thunder accompanied his yell, "I don't want to be your friend anymore." This one succeeded in creating a few fissures in there. Holding their ears, the children looked out the school window. It was really loud, so it shook their little bodies, horrifying them. Everyone other from Katsuki. No, the little boy's remarks startled him more than the unexpected weather ever could. "What the hell? I'm your only friend, Deku, you can." "We're not friends anymore, Bakugo." Izuku spoke, and her voice echoed throughout the classroom, even with the tremendous thunder. and Katsuki had Izuku's shirt clasped in his fist as he tugged the younger lad towards him before he could stop himself. "You're not supposed to stop being my friend Deku." With obvious panic in her eyes, their teacher fled before Izuku could respond. She yelled above the thundering thunder and pouring rain, "It's time to come inside." Everyone remained where they were, fixated on the two youngsters squabbling. Not many people at all anticipated this to occur. The teacher followed their eyes and noticed that little Katsuki was squeezing a sobbing Izuku, and that they were both completely soaked. She decided quickly, walked over, and took the two apart. She slashed herself when her eyes found Izuku, saying, "Enough of this. Whatever is going on here can wait. You need to." Why hadn't she realized that earlier? She dropped to one knee and met Izuku's gaze. "Izuku, your eyes are glowing." What? He trailed off. "They've been glowing the entire time," hissed Katsuki, standing behind her and observing Izuku with a blank expression on her face. That's when everything became sense. The unexpected thunderstorm that appeared out of nowhere. The fact that the local weather seemed particularly awful. And the gleaming white eyes of Izuku. She uttered, "Izuku, sweetie, slowly. Your peculiarity is causing this," she said, pointing to the nearly pitch-black clouds. "My quirk?" he asked, blinking at her until his once bright green eyes were once again visible through the white. He sighed, more to himself than to others, "I have a quirk." In almost as much time as it arrived, the skies cleared. The thunderclap, the bright lights, and the heavy rain had all vanished. Rather than them, a radiant sun and a refreshing wind rustling through their soaked garments took their place. The teacher was unable to contain her excitement as it all transpired. "That was so awesome!" exclaimed a random kid, and the other students all agreed in unison. Katsuki was the only one not to join his classmates in cheering. He simply kept his eyes set on Izuku. Like everyone else around him, he found it cool, yet he could still hear what Deku was saying, and it worried him a great deal. "That's a really special quirk you have, Izuku. I've never seen anything quite like it." Izuku gazed up at her, grinning again at what she had said. When at last he did notice her plight, he scowled and turned to face his classmates, who were in much the same condition as their instructor, and the nearly flooded playground. She just gave him a hug and a head pat, cutting him off before he could say, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." Pulling away, she said, "You don't have to apologize," grinning at him. "It wasn't intentional, but now you'll have to work on controlling that power you have there, okay?" With hurried assent, Izuku bowed his head. "I will. I promise I won't do something so scary again." She got back up, laughing. "All right." After guiding the others back inside, Katsuki turned to face the other lad and grinned down at his hands. Izuku said to himself in a whisper, "I can be a hero," but Katsuki heard, "Deku." Izuku snapped his head up, his gaze locked on Katsuki's figure. Though he had forgotten the boy's presence, he had not forgotten what he had spoken. He turned to face the other boy, straightened his shoulders, and walked away with a pout. "It's Midoriya." Katsuki remained motionless and unresponsive until the sound of the door shut caught up with him. It was only then that he tightened his grip and let a few tears run down his cheeks. He tells Izuku a lot, but he never really thought the boy would abandon him. To come. What do you think? You liked Izuku's peculiarity? Most of you have probably already guessed as to what it is. I therefore just have a few things to say. Izuku has a psychic quirk. This means that he has mental control over it, and that his feelings can affect it. Especially actually. Strong feelings, thus no, he won't intentionally trigger typhoons out of surprise or excitement. Don't expect an OP Izuku either. Instead, I'll be having him progressively develop his quirk and all of its uses. I apologize if that was not the narrative you were hoping to find. I realize that most of you are probably thinking that Izuku could never be that easily enraged by Katsuki, but keep in mind that Katsuki has never brought up Izuku's mother to make fun of him. It was as though his mother always had faith in him, even though nobody else did. Because of this, Katsuki's attack was a turning moment for him, which is also the reason I included the opening scene with them. Izuku's response to Inko's belief in her son is crucial since it conveys everything. Someone has faith in him. Naturally, those are only my opinions on the subject, however, I would be delighted to hear them all. We value constructive criticism. Section 2 Sugoi. You guys are amazing. I didn't think so many of you would like this so fast. There were so many notifications on my phone that it was making my heart race. I am extremely grateful to each and every one of you. I'll now address a few reviews. Hardcase Sakara. Let me start by expressing my gratitude for being my first reviewer. With Bakugo, I can see where you're coming from now. You wouldn't anticipate it at all. He firmly thought that Izuku was his best buddy, despite the fact that he is a jerk. It's strange, but he's still a child. He treats literally everyone badly, as you mentioned, but that's because no one, not even Izuku, intervenes, so he is free to act any way he pleases. However, he won't be as confident in himself if someone does step forward and he loses his best friend. That's what I believe would occur if it did indeed occur in canon. Additionally, keep an eye out for how Izuku's talents will develop. I don't want to give anything away. It will begin subtly. Ryujin Himari. I'll do my best to deliver, and I love this. Haha XD. I like the notion of the hammer or axe, but it's too Asgardian. Izuku's strength should be a little more distinctive, in my opinion. BTW. I adore the picture on your profile. Plus ultra, carat. Sortuop. Hard to say. Hold on, I do, XD no revealers, together, let's see what transpires. Uchiha Naruto 247. Much obliged. Laughing face, I hope you keep having fun. Son of Ophion was his first and most cool name. I'm happy you enjoy it. Izuku has a quirk in a lot of the great readings I've been reading, but I haven't seen this one done. This is strange since occasionally, I hope that Izuku's full cowling will cause some electrical harm as well, although I suppose Denki is here already. Thus, this power came into being, XD. Breakthrough software. Bravo. Smash TT. Hippen zeros. Asterisk uncontrollably weeping you understand, man. Plus ultra. Huge virtual hug you are the greatest, Council of Chaos. White Raven song. Kisses brain you have an amazing mind. I'm sorry to disappoint everybody who believed he would. But Izuku fights better than you will. Don't worry. Dio over heaven. We've fulfilled your request. Hanakim Taylor. I sincerely appreciate it. Ma boy. I'm grateful. And all we can do is find out, D. Dipper Gleeful 123. Why do you wish for lightning to strike Izuku? XD I'm laughing uncontrollably. I'm happy you found it enjoyable, and I hope you still. Ol Maddox. Wait to hear more. I hope you'll adore it. Dragon 312 Plasma. Appropriate. Everyone has a breaking point, even with his extreme loyalty and patience. Izuku isn't even past that. Hikage Nuts. Wordlessly holds tissue alright. I guess I got all of you. I understand. You guys really are amazing. I apologize for not informing you sooner, but I neglected to mention that this will feature yaoi, boy love. If you find that offensive, I apologize. There is no smut for those who do enjoy it. I feel like I'm going to hit my head if I even try writing it. Combinations. Well, I think. D notice. I do not, under any circumstance, own BHNA. Sadly, someone else does. The silence before the storm. Izuku, 5 years old. With his feet hanging over the edge of the table, Izuku eagerly jotted down what he knew about his peculiarity. Until now, when he was attempting to maintain control, he had not succeeded in making it rain once more. He was still annoyed by it, though. The previous time he attempted to create a large storm, he was unable to do so. As his mother walked around the kitchen making dinner, he gave it some thought and tapped his pencil against his lip. The reason I did that the last time was because of Bakugo. He quickly shook his head, clearly not wanting to consider that. Perhaps he will concentrate on the small things and ignore the larger issues. Izuku furrowed his brows, trying to get the air currents to move in a way that would raise his notepad into the air. More difficult than he had anticipated. Before long, He was exerting all of his physical might to make the silly book move just a little bit. Izuku used all of his might, but all he was able to release was a tiny puff of air. He slapped his head on the table, shrieking with embarrassment, "Eep!" He was out of his chair and sprinting to the kitchen in no time at all when he heard his mother yelling and pots hitting the floor. "Mom!" When Inko heard him coming, she turned slightly confused to see her son. "Izuku-kun," she said slowly. Pointing to her hair, she asked him, "Did you do this?" Izuku snapped his mouth shut to keep any noise from seeping out. Autumn was here now, and his mother's hair bore the evidence of it. There were leaves all over the place. He could stop his eyes from crying and his shoulders from quivering, but he could not stop any sounds from escaping. With her hair blown back and leaves poking out, his mother looked silly. "I'm sorry, Mum." She noticed that her little bean was trying not to giggle at her as she looked down at him. He started giggling and she inclined her head, grinning back. She said, "Izuku-kun, you're really going to be sorry now," and started to run after him. Izuku cried out, laughing, "Ah, save me," and took off. For now, Izuku was enjoying himself excessively, but he would record his observations later. Izuku was able to control air currents. Izuku is still 5 years old. The Midoriya's flat was peaceful that night, with Inko having just finished putting her kid to sleep. She was lounging on the couch when her mind drifted to Mitsuki, her best friend, and her young son. The mother had called again, wanting to know if Izuku would be interested in going on a playdate with little Katsuki. When Izuku shook his head and rejected it outright, it broke her heart. She broke the bad news to her buddy that he was still refusing to speak to Katsuki, and she groaned wearily before nodding. Should she? During the call, she detected the slightest trace of hurt in Katsuki's voice, but she declined to speak. Every time Inko questioned, her kid would just shut off from her, and she had no understanding why he was so adamant about avoiding seeing the other. After the third time, she gave up and accepted her fate of simply not knowing. She noted that Izuku's control slipped merely thinking about it, and she believed that the sound of thunder had a significant role in it. Thud at the sound, Inko sat up and looked around, blinking. Crash! She jumped to her feet in surprise and hurried to Izuku's room. She needed to reach out to her son in case something was going on. She flipped on the light and hurriedly pushed open the door. "Izuku-kun, are you?" She interrupted herself as soon as she realized her son's situation. Mom." Her son was floating in midair, as if he was meant to be in bed, and this was the most natural thing. "Izuku." Izuku lost focus and fell onto his bed, hastily covering his head with the blankets. "I'm sleeping, Mom." "We a grin, you little villain." Inko tackled the tiny lump beneath the covers. Wahahaha. Izuku was able to raise himself by adjusting the air currents surrounding him. "Izuku, 7 years old, Moom." Izuku whimpered as he felt his headache becoming worse and snot trickling down his nose. "Just a minute, Izuku-kun." He rolled onto his side, groaning in agony, and fixed his gaze on the television. He developed a cold. He was just lucky. His mother had placed him in the living room so that, in the event of an emergency, she could easily reach him. "Worrywart," he concluded. With a bowl of chicken noodle soup in hand, Inko headed to her miserable hero and exclaimed, "Soup's ready. It's hot, so please take caution," she said. He sat up slowly, muttering, and watched her set the bowl down on the coffee table. Something itched in his nose. Than Choo. His whole body tingled for a while, and then he smelled smoke. Izuku opened his eyes and was a little taken aback to see his soup and the coffee table in ruins. His mother emerged with a fire extinguisher and sprayed it along the couch, getting him with it as well, startling him out of his reverie. "Ak Mom!" he exclaimed. His mother questioned him, "Didn't you feel that, Izuku?" With a look of shock, he tilted his head and gazed up at her, asking, "Felt what?" "You were on fire." Spluttering, he looked down at his shirt and saw several holes and scorch marks all over it. How?" "Izuku," she said, gazing at her son in astonishment before pointing to the wall that had a large burn mark all over it. "You just shot electricity from your body." And you were on fire and didn't even feel it? She said, reaching forward to put her hand on his brow. Come to think of it, your temperature feels normal, but you have a cold. Izuku blinked, then realized a couple of things. Izuku was not impacted by temperature and was able to produce his own electricity. Izuku, 10 years old, breathing deeply, Izuku stood in the open clearing. He was alone himself and didn't want his mother or anybody else to see him at that moment. All he had to do was focus. Breathing out slowly, he closed his eyes and felt the breeze blow past him, surrounding his whole body and ruffling his hair. The once clear sky gradually started to get darker around him. Good, he thought to himself, but concentrate only in this area. The location was quickly shrouded in gloomy clouds, and before long a torrential downpour arrived, gradually filling the clearing he was in. He left it without losing focus as the once pond-like clearing filled with raindrops gradually but steadily. The pond dried up because of the recent drought, but Izuku, being Izuku, was unable to dismiss it. It was the first time he had ever intentionally produced a small-scale downpour. With his peculiarity, he was becoming more powerful. Izuku acquired the ability to produce regional weather phenomena. Perhaps he will soon discover how to make others. Izuku, 12 years old. Izuku looked up from mending his red trainers and said, "You know this is going to be uncomfortable, right, Mom?" Inko sighed and reached for her keys. "Maybe, but we were invited to dinner, and we are going, Izuku-kun." "I'll go if you stop calling me that," Izuku said with a frown. "Never. Besides, you have no say in it, you're already going." After 20 minutes the Midoriyas and Bakugos were gathered around a single table. Despite the two moms' cheerful conversation, there was a slight tension between them. Izuku was sitting quite clearly next to a furious Katsuki, and the two haven't spoken words since the meal began. Auntie Mitsuki hissed, "Oi, you little shit, get up off your ass and go do the dishes." "Huh?" Katsuki snapped. "Why the foo?" Mitsuki reached over and gave him an upside-down head whack. "Language brat." With a mutter of complaint, Katsuki stood up and started gathering the empty dishes, stopping momentarily at Izuku's before he grabbed it and walked away. "Izuku-kun, go help Katsuki in the kitchen." "Huh? But WH." "Please," Inko replied, grinning tightly at him. He was heading inside the kitchen without wasting a moment. "I'm not sure who scares me more sometimes, my mom or auntie." As he entered, he saw that Katsuki was facing away from him and was probably aware of him. With a sigh, he moved to stand next to the blonde and silently took the wet dishes to dry them before putting them away. That is how they carried on until Katsuki made the decision to end the quiet. "Deku, you could at least try to talk to me," he hissed. Izuku paused and looked at the dish he was holding before answering. "It's Midoriya, I've told you that several times, Bakugo," he answered, making Katsuki tenser next to him. They were genuinely alone together for the first time in a while, and their chat was gradually growing longer. "And why would I want to talk to you?" they asked each other. "Well, for one, Izuku, you're in my home helping me do the dishes." Katsuki gritted his teeth and scowled at the tiny lad standing next to him. He snapped around to give the blonde a, "Don't you dare call me that," look in response to that. "It is your FCUcan name, isn't it?" It was with a hint of a growl that Midoriya gave him a little of a surprise, but more than a thrill. This was the initial instance where he had truly elicited a response from the youngster. He would constantly give him the cold shoulder in school and, if necessary, give him brief answers. He smirked and said, "Problem?" Maybe he was pushing it, but he didn't seem to care. He overlooked this. He missed the nerd, damn it. Izuku inquired, exhausted, "What do you want, Bakugo?" Katsuki scowled in response. "Are you really still mad at me? It was years?" Izuku interrupted him with a, "No, I'm not mad at you, then." "But did you ever think to apologize?" That was a blank for him. Even after all this time, he hadn't offered an apology. Even though he was aware of his actions and that they were wrong, he was unable to apologize. To be honest, he tried, but nothing ever worked out. He was simply unable to. With his hands still plunged in soapy water, he fixed a silent gaze on Izuku. Izuku turned aside and replied, "Yeah, I really didn't think so," ending the conversation. "Deku," he continued, "I said it's Midoriya," in an icy tone. The room's temperature plummeted sharply as if to match his tone, and he discovered that his hands were frozen in the once soapy water. "The..." Mitsuki cried out from the other room, trembling in her chair. "Katsuki, did you with the heater again?" With a sigh, Masaru stood up and said, "I'll go take a look and see, darling." With concern, Inko glanced at the two boys in the other room. Izuku gazed at the blonde, taken aback by her appearance, before slowly raising an eyebrow to meet his. He stammered, "Oh, sorry," and turned to leave the room. After he left, he could hear the blonde swearing under his breath, and the temperature gradually went back to normal. 5 minutes later, Katsuki came back to the table, a little shaky. They did not exchange a word, just like previously. Izuku discovered that he could potentially flash freeze objects and create freezing temperatures. Later, he would have to rehearse that. Izuku, age 14. The day of fate. Izuku was walking home when he complained to himself. He was aware that Katsuki was only attempting to elicit a response from him. Ever since that evening, the blonde had not let up. He had not, however, stopped calling him Deku, or offered an apology. Did he appear foolish? Did Katsuki believe that by remaining unchanged, he could make things better? Recalling the boy's statements from earlier in the day in class, Izuku snarled to himself. "Huh? Deku and I are the only who are gonna get into UA from this shitty school. The rest of y'all are just in stepping stones." The blonde's remarks caused a ruckus in the class. He merely grinned at everyone, glancing over Izuku's shoulder to see how he would respond. His smile vanished the once he saw the other was simply staring out the window, even somewhat moved by what he had spoken. He scowled and turned to face front. Why was the geek acting so stubbornly? Izuku, stomping his feet a little angrily, stopped beneath the tunnel and scowled at nothing. "Bakugo, you stupid, ignorant, and idiotic." As Izuku stomped his feet in response to every insult Bakugo leveled at him, he failed to notice that the manhole cover behind him had moved. The unexpected presence behind him went unnoticed by him. It was too late before he noticed any of it. His only warning was a little shift in the breeze, and as he swung around, a wave of sludge tried to push its way down his throat. He foolishly attempted to scream, but it just made the thing go more down his throat. The odd gurgle of a voice told Izuku to try not to fight it, kid. It'll only hurt that much worse, but he was unable to open his eyes. It was starting to hurt, and he was scared. I didn't know that man was in town. I really screwed up this time. Izuku was dying, and he knew it. The idea rocked him to his very core. He could feel death's icy touch on his fingertips. His mind was a storm and his emotions were a whirlwind. He heard the voice again, and this time it was, "What the hell? Scared to death?" The icy feeling got stronger, and this time it felt strangely soothing to Izuku. He could also feel the gunk draining from his system as the evil withdrew. "What are you doing, kid?" he exclaimed, not caring that the thing was screeching. It seemed secure and comforting to be cold. Izuku caved into it. "Ah." Izuku, exhausted, pulled his mouth open only to scamper backwards and gasp in amazement. Upon finally catching a glimpse of the creature pursuing him, he was struck by how massive and intimidating it appeared. But it was the villain before him, frozen solid, and the snow that persisted that puzzled him, not that. Glancing down at his hands as though they would respond, he said, "What the did do that?" He vanquished a villain. He shielded himself. He vanquished a villain by himself. Before long, Izuku's joy was dashed as the manhole moved once more and someone entered. Izuku took a fast step back and began to cover his body with lightning out of instinct. Anybody attempting to touch him would be zapped violently, and he might flee if necessary. All he wanted to do was flee. Izuku foolishly blinked while staring at the apparition, saying, "Fear not, for why the hell is it so cold? All might?" The man mused, as he turned to face the voice and noticed the criminal he was pursuing immobilized in front of a young middle school student. "Oh. Mine." Shaking off his fanboy thoughts with haste, he focused his attention to the villain. If he would ever attack me, I stopped him with my quirk. You should probably call it in. I don't know how to unfreeze him. As the snowstorm that had been continuing slowly started to clear, leaving behind a frozen passageway and villain, All Might looked first at the small child and then about himself. That's a powerful quirk you have there, young man. I'm glad you aren't hurt. Izuku gave his idol a bashful smile while scratching behind his head. It's really not what I meant to do. I'm still figuring out what I can do, he said, lowering his hand and moving quickly in the direction of his hero. Can I get your autograph, please? I've admired you for so long. Grinning, All Might accepted the provided pen and notebook and signed it. This is the reason he was passionate about his work and encouraged the next generation to follow in his footsteps when he passed away. Anything for an aspiring hero. With a quiet gasp, Izuku turned to face his hero. You think I can be a hero like you, All Might? He glanced at the boy, gave him a gentle smile, and touched the boy's head. Yes. I believe you can. That day Izuku managed to flash freeze someone and conjure up a blizzard. Perhaps. On that day, he also acquired his idol as a new admirer. To come. I want to thank everyone who has read, liked, followed, and reviewed this. I didn't intend to post another video so quickly, but I had to after witnessing the damage. I'm hoping you guys enjoy it, and hopefully it's longer as requested by a few of you. This was merely intended to illustrate how Izuku is beginning to wield his power and the various ways in which the plot may develop. He may look strong to some of you right now, but there's a lot more to come, I promise. He's still an amateur, I suppose. The following chapter picks up significantly. It's the admission test. When I can, I'll try to provide an update. In the interim, plus Ultra Section 3. Hello everyone, this is me again with another Stormbreaker update. It's amazing how beautifully this story has been received thus far. It's just so awesome. I was asked a really good question by my sister concerning this tale, and that was the estimated duration, though to be honest, I'm not really sure. There are a lot of BHNA episodes, but I doubt I'm covering them all. Actually, this is more of an Izuku tale. I suppose him. Something to ponder. By the way, anyone guessed the pairing? It's time to respond to some reviews. Regalman 17. I'm happy you're finding it enjoyable, lol. Collider 99. Not sure, however, I still wish to impart to him a special method of working. Many heroes share similar abilities, but they employ them in various ways. I'm hoping not to screw things up. Ghost Shot 841. He. I love that you spelled it correctly as well. Lol. Usually, I just say, meow meow. SO82829. I will investigate that without a doubt. I'm grateful. I have no life to live. I'm very inspired by you right now. Additionally, I like your name. Afion's son. Hello once more, and to be honest, I'm not sure. Really, I haven't given it any thought. I might let you guys to choose one for him. Vertix Rican. I already consider you to be my new best buddy because you said the story was excellent. The yaoi are not a major concern for you. It won't be in your face, but it will undoubtedly be there. Still, I appreciate you giving it a shot. Lord Wolf. Startled. I've been transformed. Well, but yeah, lol. Storm served as the basis for this concept. A Gallifreyan. Well, it's certainly more obvious now, isn't it? I'm happy you enjoy it. White Raven Song. Apparently, you're interested in learning more about his peculiarity than just how it operates. I recognize that, but regrettably, he is still a novice. That's where UA enters. There, he'll encounter many more situations, and those lead to discoveries. We shall learn as Izuku does. Arab Gottlieb 14. I'm so happy you're finding this entertaining. El Gonza. I truly appreciate it. Thank you, Seika Grandolin. Much obliged. We regret that he will not inherit it. We know you were hoping for that. Wreckboy. Hides Faso. This much praise is beyond my heart. I'm very happy you enjoy it. Ryujinimari. I apologize. I can understand how you could get the idea. I am happy that you still find it appealing, and yes, I did purchase your Plus Ultra. Hippin Zeros. I'm pleased I chose to at least upload another story for you all because it seems like you guys really enjoyed this one. I hope they don't seem too out of character. I'm simply trying to stay as true to their personas as I can. Alright, I'm through. I hope to have included everyone. If not, I will respond to you in Chapter 4. Nobody will be excluded. Notice: I do not own BHNA in any way, shape, or form. Sadly, someone else does. Called into action, Izuku was still ecstatic a few weeks after that fatal encounter with his idol. He had the opportunity to meet his hero, and he also felt that he could realize his goal. He'd come home that day and told his mum about it, and when she found out he'd been attacked by a villain, she almost passed out. She spoiled him every chance she got for the remainder of that week. He just about made it out. He inhaled deeply and balled his fists. He needed to develop his peculiarity even more and figure out how to employ it in battle. He couldn't depend on luck to win him battles. The encounter with the sludge villain had been a total fluke. He required the abilities. With that resolve, he stepped out onto Takoba's seaside bay's sand and, as though defying it, gazed at the massive amount of trash scattered around. I will be a hero. After making that statement, he went right to work. He began by strengthening the objects he could lift with his winds by lifting several large appliances at once. Control emerged at that point, and he steered the stream towards the pile next to the trash can while perspiring. He was moving forward. When he wasn't at school, he was at the beach, working hard on his assignments. A hero wasn't made of strength alone. If he was foolish, he wouldn't be of any use to anyone. He would go back to the beach every day and approach the trash in a different way. What didn't require recycling was used his electricity to blast it, focusing on his goal and the amount of power he could muster. He had truly conjured up what could only be described as a lightning bolt with his fingertips once, when he had mustered all of his strength. Even though it happened in the blink of an eye and was rapid, he managed to follow its movements as it danced away from his fingertips and scorched the sand and the piles of trash. With that one, he would need to use greater caution. However, it made him ponder whether he could pluck the lightning from the sky again in the same way. Naturally, he never gave it a try after witnessing the explosion his fingertips had already produced. No need to make a big deal out of himself. He would do it in a more discreet place. Still, he practiced calling in blizzards more. Compared to his other instantaneous attacks, the buildup was still a tad slow, even if he had gotten very good at it. He didn't have to rush it, though. It also came with the power to call forth hailstorms in specific areas. Once he discovered how to control the cold, it was simple. In addition, he discovered how to manipulate the hail's size and density, and, in an attempt to treat himself, he even created some snow around him. His ability to call in rainstorms was quicker than previously, which made flash floods somewhat less likely. He could flash freeze objects if he mixed it with the cold. That was his notion, however, he hadn't really given it a shot yet. Having an enormous block of ice in the open with no means of melting it would not be ideal. Relentlessly, he perfected a clever technique that allowed him to create an intense roar of thunder simply by clapping his hands together. That might be pretty disastrous at point-blank range. Izuku's ability to control the wind was now the most advanced of all of his talents, along with his ability to channel lightning via his body. He pondered this and made a few little changes to his hero costume as a result. He merely needed to prepare for the entrance exams for the time being. He'll have to work on ensuring that all of his abilities were comparable to one another. He had the highest of goals in mind. 10 months had passed by in an all too short time, and now he had to take the entrance exams. Just one more day. Going was worth going for the view. He had cleared the beach quite effectively in that short amount of time. He must bring his mother here at some point to explain to her his activities and the reason behind his slight weight gain. Even while his stature wasn't remarkable or disproportionate, it was still enough to draw some attention, along with his recent haircut. He had started shaving his hair's sides and leaving his curls in place. After complimenting him on how adorable he was, His mother quickly plaited a portion of his hair into a lengthy braid that hung over the side of his head. He didn't usually give his appearance much thought, although he did seem really cute in it. And so the exam day arrived. With an intimidating appearance, Izuku swallowed uneasily. He was pleasantly diverted by his mother's attendance because she had wished to see him depart. However, she had left, leaving him by himself. He felt a little rattled. That was undoubtedly the reason he stumbled over his own feet on his first stride. Even his balance was being affected by his nervousness. Using all of his strength, he drew the wind around himself and whirled around, briefly leaving the ground with his feet before landing and gathering his courage again. Whoa! Then, flinching from the startling voice behind him, swiftly lost it. Izuku noticed a gorgeous female when he peered over his shoulder. Her cheeks were dusty pink, and her short brown hair was cut in a bob. Her face resembled a heart, and her eyes were large and round. She was most likely the center of attention. She said, "I saw what you did, and it was so cool." He didn't know exactly what to say, so he just nodded slowly. But the girl didn't find his lack of words bothersome. "It would have been unfortunate if you fell just before the exams," she said with a smile, then started to walk in front of him and wave. "I hope you do well." He smiled gently, blinking. "Why you too?" he yelled in her direction. It didn't matter if she heard him, he wasn't really sure. He needed to pass his exam. Deku. He glanced at the voice behind him. Bakugo. He didn't think it was worth correcting him this time since it would only cause conflict. With a slow nod, Katsuki looked at him. He said nothing more than, "Good luck," and walked by him. Izuku followed him closely, observing him go forward. Katsuki twitched, saying, "You too," but she said nothing. Subsequently, Izuku entered as well, and to his astonishment, he was seated next to Katsuki. The two paid no attention to each other, preferring to concentrate on the pro-hero present mic as he described the operation of the entrance exam. They were scheduled to take a written exam after competing against robot villains in a practical assessment. But was that a sensible move? What if pupils were unable to concentrate on the written exam because they were too exhausted after the practical exam? Was it a test of some kind? Perhaps, taking down as many of the fictitious villains as you could was the aim of the first exam. The test has a point system. A loud voice shouted, pulling Izuku out of his reverie, "Your incessant muttering is distracting." He squeaked, hiding his mouth, sorry." He had a terrible habit of nodding off and rambling loudly. "What he does is irrelevant to you," hissed Katsuki. Izuku made the decision to ignore the two men going forward and concentrate instead on finding ways to get as many points as she could. Before long, he was outdoors with the other participants. They had been divided into groups, and Izuku would always be happy that he was not in Katsuki's group. Glancing around, he noticed the girl at the door wringing her hands nervously, so he decided to go talk to her and perhaps provide some words of encouragement. The boy with the glasses from before interrupted him before he could say anything more. "She's obviously already very nervous. It will do you good not to make it worse for her." At that, Izuku felt his eye twitch, but he kept his mouth shut. Arguing wasn't appropriate here. After giving the girl one more glance, he turned aside and moved to the front. He appeared uninteresting, and those in his immediate vicinity murmured to themselves that he wouldn't pass. They most likely believed that their silence was sufficient, but the wind, which was his ally, carried their voices. It was time to show them what his training had produced. The doors opened abruptly, and before anybody could gather their thoughts, Izuku caught a sudden gust of wind that carried him ahead of everyone else, who was left staring at him in shock before sprinting ahead as well. Izuku stopped right behind the group of criminals after slicing through them with the help of that well-known current coursing through his body. Elevating himself to confront them, he lowered his hands and unleashed a barrage of lightning strikes that instantly eliminated all the robots encircling him. He had been able to call forth lightning. Many lightning strikes, actually. He had been working on his skills. He was capable of this. The black clouds above them were instantly gone, so no one could see them. While in midair, he became aware of all the air currents surrounding him and slightly unsteady, he started to glide with them. His ability to detect and ride air currents was the result of his control of the wind. It was. Nothing felt better than the wind tearing through his hair, making him feel like he was flying. This allowed him to cover a lot of ground and greatly ease the process of earning points. He was doing quite well. Feeling a touch elated, he allowed a smile to creep across his face and decided to move on. The buildings trembled all around him, and the smile faded. When he saw the participants rushing in the other direction, he scowled. The air ahead of him shifted, revealing the zero-pointer's impending presence, and he stiffened. With a focus shot, he fell flat on his butt while the others sprinted by. This is absurd. He opened his mouth to stand up and flee as well, but he heard a voice. Someone requesting assistance. Turning, he saw that the girl from before was caught with her legs under some debris, and the zero-pointer was dangerously close to crushing her. Why was she getting no assistance? She let out another cry. Suddenly, he was sprinting in her direction as the clouds began to gather and get darker overhead. One shot, his thoughts rushed. All I have, and all I require, is that. The girl looked up, gasping at the sound of his approach. He abruptly halted while raising his palm to the sky and angled his body as though he was going to launch a spear. Ha! With all his strength, he threw out his hand, causing his entire body to lurch forward and off the ground. Krakoom. It vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving only the effects of his presence. The zero-pointer's body split open, its form exploding with leftover electrical energy. The spectators stared in wonder, the participants gaping in shock. They had never seen a lightning bolt like that before. For his part, Izuku passed out immediately after. He had never before used so much force. He had never shown such desperation. He had to save her, though. The others were enthralled with him and chatted about him, wondering if he wanted to blend in so he wouldn't stand out. Tenya Iida gazed in wonder and curiosity at the boy. 1 week later, wordlessly, Inko and Izuku ate dinner together at the table. He had not heard back from UA for an entire week. He questioned whether going after the zero-pointer cost him any opportunities. There was nothing to gain from winning it. Perhaps the idea was to trick players into unintentionally losing points by trying to assault something like that and failing. Was the UA that severe? Izuku let out a mortified cry. Did he just set himself up for failure? With concern, Inko glanced at her kid. Still, she would have been devastated if he hadn't saved that girl. Or perhaps not. Since they were keeping an eye on us, they should have halted it before anything similar occurred, right? With a moan, Izuku rose from the table. Izuku-kun? Thanks for the dinner, Mom. I'm gonna go to bed early tonight. Unable to think of anything to say to comfort him, Inko watched him walk away. What exactly was UA? What are you doing to her son? Izuku was hunched over in his work chair inside his room. He gazed intently at every All Might poster strewn all over his wall. He wanted to cry. His mother, an envelope gripped in her fists, slammed his door and snapped him out of his reverie. Izuku. Mom? She threw the envelope towards him and said, "This just came for you." He cautiously received it and peered down at it. "Open it, Izuku." He nodded, gulped, and cautiously opened the envelope. A letter and a little CD with a recording of All Might clattered onto his desk and blared to life. Did he pass? With his heart in his throat, he turned to face his mother slowly and muttered, "I passed?" His mum was in tears already. "You passed, Izuku-kun." He started laughing and crying with his mother. He succeeded. He glanced back at the screen, trying to see his name and the points. His mother said, "Oh, you tied with Katsuki-kun?" That was a little surprise, to be honest. To come. The entrance exams were one thing. Was that as much fun for you guys as it was for me? I'm fired up. How do you feel about Izuku's appearance? Izuku once read a story in which his mother would mistakenly braid his hair. It was so adorable that I had to include it. How does that go over with you guys? How do you feel about Izuku's increasing influence? Personally, I enjoy how he can sense the air currents and adjust them to his advantage, effectively surfing the wind. I thought that was very badass. You'll see why I wanted him to have that capability as soon as possible. Please share your opinions with me. I welcome constructive feedback, and flaming will just help me create my own personal meow meow. Plus Ultra. Section 4. Hello everyone. Up until now, I've just updated whenever I could. I'm still figuring out when to do this. However, my friend suggested that I post an update once a week. What are your thoughts, guys? Update once a week or whenever I can. Tell me, but let me respond to some reviews first. Guardian of Legion. No way. Looks that way, for sure, huh? Well. Love Crazy Hedgehog. I apologize for hearing that. I hope you enjoy the story even more now. Lol, son of Ophion. Man, I really can't help it. Might I reduce if it becomes too much? I dunno, I really enjoy answering everyone. Trollzor69. You know, hee. That keeps happening to me. Though it's a yaoi tale. I can understand the pairing idea. Perhaps another time. I'm happy the narrative appeals to you, Carrot. Delaware Smasher. I mean, it was really fantastic, wasn't it, Carrot? Silver Icy. Since Storm served as the idea's inspiration, his quirk won't provide him additional power or put him on a par with the others. That's when Izuku develops into it, though, ideas. Izuku uses it somewhat differently than she does. I'm happy you find it enjoyable. I'm not sure how to solve that. Uchiha Naruto 247. This is sort of his tale. Apologies. Emiya Excalibur. It's true that their power sets are same. Just a different application. Tasaka 143. I'm happy you enjoy it so far. Lol XD. Side. Hehe, XD. I'm grateful. Mike 202303. What's up? By what do you mean? I'm a little disoriented. SO82829. Attempting to visualize it. I'm now bothered by it. L1GHTS the way. Haha. I'm happy you think Izuku is as cute as I do, and yes, I've already thought of a pair. But I'm curious how everyone will respond to it. Sortuop. I'm grateful. Knowing that your narrative is doing so well makes you feel happy. Jaden, the trainer. Plus Ultra, Lightning Blade 49. Of course you're correct, but it would be difficult for them to attempt to kidnap him. Though I've been working on the Aizawa scene a lot, I like the way you think. I hope you enjoy it. Ryujinimari. Carrot Elegant J0K3R. That's a nice name. I'll think about it. It's okay for everyone else to express their opinions about Izuku's hero name. Aetherius Queen 777. Carrot, that's a cute name. Large fan of fairy tale. Crying uncontrollably Wreckboy. Happy birthday. I was concerned that the alterations I made would make him seem uncharacteristic. It appears that my worries were in vain. Arist 2305. Excellent Truel 91. Even before Izuku's quirk appeared or he discovered Izuku was without a quirk, Bakugo always believed he was better than Izuku. His constant belief that he was superior to Izuku in whatever that they accomplished is evident in canon. He was constantly bullying him. It wasn't like his bullying instincts just appeared out of nowhere. Izuku's breaking point isn't related to how long Bakugo has been making fun of him. Rather, it has to do with what is being made fun of. Alright. Funny, I've been receiving this a lot. Yes, this idea was inspired by Storm from the X-Men. Though Izuku's strength in this tale ultimately came from weather manipulation, I had two other ideas. Plant manipulation and probability manipulation were the other two. If I receive a lot of suggestions, I might write a one-shot featuring the quirk you guys enjoy the most. Disclaimer. Sadly, someone else owns BHNA. I do not in any way own it. Thunder, Rage. Good luck on your first day, Izu-kun. Izuku grinned, nodded, and gave his mother a brief embrace before taking off. Indeed, he was attending the school of his dreams. His objective was within his grasp. Everything was so bizarre. Izuku headed to his new school with those ideas in mind and a persistent smile on his face. He arrived and hesitantly peered up at the enormous doors. UA genuinely goes above and beyond for its pupils. Taking a deep breath, He made a quick prayer to whoever was listening before reaching for the door handle. Please, keep that other guy and Bakugo out of the same hero class. His hopes were instantly dashed as he pulled it open and saw that the boys were squabbling. He sighed as he entered, and the boy with the glasses saw him right away. He seemed to be watching out for him, almost. I deeply apologize for my rash behavior during the exams. It seems you were the only one keen enough to uncover the true objective of the test, Iida said, bowing deeply at the waist and turning to face Izuku. Izuku spluttering, he staggered backward. He stammered, I. Oh, it's you. Izuku turned to face the voice and saw it was the cheerful girl from the exam. I remember you. With a radiant smile, she approached the two. I would hope so, you saved me. Izuku flustered a little and nervously stroked his head. I couldn't just leave you there. Uraraka glanced at him, blinking, then screeching and tumbling in front of them. You're so cool. His face was a bright red by now, and he had both hands encircling his head in a traditional Izuku fashion. Katsuki turned away from them, scowling at the three. My name is Ochako Uraraka, she smiled. Izuku Midoriya, not to be left out, he spoke forward. My name is Tenya Iida. The door flew open with a loud bang, but nobody went inside. The anomaly brought the class to stillness. A weary voice growled, if you're here to make friends, then you're wasting my time, and the kids moved towards the door to see what looked like a caterpillar. After saying, this is a hero class, and with that said, I'm your homeroom teacher. Aizawa Shota. He pulled off his sleeping bag and showed off his perpetually exhausted visage. He took out a juice box and took a leisurely sip before going on. Drawing back from his nest, he says, I suggest you get change into these now, and distributes PE outfits. Congregated outside on the PE field, the A1 students cautiously whispered to one another. Aizawa sighs, looks at them, and then says something. Since UA allows their teachers complete autonomy, I'm going to have you all take a Quirk apprehension test. At that moment, the class fell silent and concentrated on him. He pulls out a ball and says, since you wouldn't be able to do this at your previous schools, I'm doing it now to measure your quirks. Lazily, Katsuki easily catches the ball. You throw that using your quirk. Katsuki, seeing no need for more explanations, moved forward. I don't care what you do. All I expect you to do is not cross that line, Aizawa said. Die. Was followed by an explosion as Katsuki threw the ball and it shot upward. Aizawa held up the monitor and nodded. 705.2 meters. Soon, the class was buzzing with anticipation at the prospect of utilizing their peculiarities in this manner. Make no mistake, this is a test. And whoever ranks last in total points will be deemed hopeless and immediately expelled. The responses came right away. EHHHH. But that's not fair. He answered, his eyes steeled. They stop talking after he says, the world is unfair. It's a hero's job to combat that unfairness. So I suggest you use your quirks wisely. Izuku said this, and for some reason, Aizawa glanced at him. A 50-meter dash served as the initial test. Utilizing their peculiarities to increase their mobility was the aim. Izuku was made to feel as though someone was authoring his life or was simply tormenting him when it was his turn to run with Katsuki. He dismissed the ideas, looked forward, and paid no attention to the sound of tiny explosions off to his left. Though it wasn't strictly a race, Izuku was nevertheless determined to win. Thus, with two tiny tornadoes serving as propellers at his feet, Izuku rocketed off like a bullet as soon as the whistle was blown. Fearing he would become sidetracked and lose, he dared not look at the blonde. He didn't have to wait long to cross the finish line and skid to a stop, sending dust flying in all directions. As soon as he turned back, he found Katsuki looking at him with hot daggers, and he knew right once that he had defeated the youngster. The outcomes were 3.04 seconds for Tenya Iida, 5.58 seconds for Tsuyu Asui, 7.15 seconds for Ochako Uraraka, 5.49 seconds for Mashirao Ojiro, and 5.51 seconds for Yuga Aoyama. The test of grip strength came next. Katsuki Bakugo took 4.13 seconds, and Izuku Midoriya took 4.09 seconds. Izuku sighed as he nervously glanced at his handheld gadget. It wasn't really a physical peculiarity, but that was beyond his control. He clenched his hand around the instrument, resigned to his fate. Mezzo Shoji, 540.0 pounds. Midoriya Izuku, 56.0 kilograms. Izuku made a self-promise to perform better in the remaining tests, clenching his fist. Aizawa, meanwhile, gave him a detached stare. The standing long jump was the next exercise. It was pretty clear by now that the objective was to use their peculiarities to clean the sandbox. Izuku bounded forward when it was his turn, and just as he got to the line, he pushed his hands down and let out a rapid burst of wind that flipped him into the air and over the sandbox. He landed softly on his feet, grinned, and glanced over his shoulder. He made the sandbox clean. Katsuki Bakugo. Sandbox cleared Yuga Aoyama. Sandbox cleared Izuku Midoriya. Sandbox cleared. The ball throw test came next. Aizawa had Katsuki perform the test so that everyone would know exactly what needed to be done. As Izuku moved forward, he inhaled deeply. There was no way he wasn't doing well. He knew he was. Any observers could not help but notice his evident confidence. As he focused, the wind soon collected around him. Even from where he stood, Izuku was oblivious to the way it battered his peers. He felt cut off from everything as he reached to toss it. With unsteady gasps, he watched as the ball fell and rolled at his feet. What was happening? I erased your quirk. Startled by the remarks, he turned to see Aizawa, his eyes a fiery red, hair floating above his head. He recognized the man instantly. He was Eraserhead, the underground hero. Having confidence is one thing, but having too much confidence is another, he said, observing the boy's slight body tremble. The others around him were whispering to each other about hearing about the massive lightning bolt, but he didn't care. I saw what your quirk did to the zero-pointer. It was powerful. But that's all it was. It lacked finesse and control, he said, waiting to see how the child would respond. Did you notice your quirk was affecting your classmates? If you continue on like this, you're going to be more of a hazard than help to anyone. Izuku attempted to control his breathing, but he was unable to sense anything around him. Without his quirk, it was almost as if he were blind. That's when he had the shocking realization that his quirk was actually another sense. There was more to it than just power. Izuku gave his sensei a wobbly nod, but even in his distress, he was able to hear what the guy had to say, and he felt his senses coming back. It was immediately comforting. Resuming his attention on the ball, he turned away and considered Aizawa's statement. He was certainly in control, but where was the finesse? He turned to face his classmates, seeing a few of them straightening their shirts after the wind had blown them up. Was that the man's intention? His peculiarity being more dangerous? All he wanted was for that not to be the case. Izuku made a self-promise to constantly be attentive of his surroundings going forward. Never again, he resolved. With his focus fixed, he went to work, and this time, rather than pushing the air away from him, he pulled it out in the direction of a single point. The others felt a breeze, but that was about it. Izuku, though, sensed everything. The wind gathered around the ball as it stood rooted there, focusing all of it onto his palm. Izuku reached out and let go of all the wind that had built up in that one moment. VVWWWHOSSH. The ball just kept rising higher and higher as it shot through the air, leaving little circles in its wake. It like a loud boom. Aizawa smiled behind him, clearly pleased by the child in front of him. The students applauded. Izuku grinned. Katsuki Bakugo. 705.2 meters. Am I still a hazard, sensei? Ochako Uraraka. 905.1 meters. Izuku Midoriya. Infinity. They underwent 3 further tests after that. Sit-ups, a long run, and toe touches. Half the class was breathing badly by the time they finished. They were exhausted, but they didn't feel sorry for themselves at all. After observing them for a minute or so, Aizawa moved forward and leaned the results against the wall. They flocked around to view their rating as soon as he took a step back. Final findings: Izuku Midoriya. First Momo Yaoyorozu. Second Shoto Todoroki. Third. Fourth Tenya Iida. Fifth Fumikage Tokiyami. Sixth Mezzo Shoji. Seventh Mashirao Ojiro. Eighth Eijiro Kirishima. Ninth Mina Ishido. 10th Katsuki Bakugo. 4th. 10th Koji Koda. 11th Rikido Sato. 13th Suya Asui. 14th Yuga Aoyama. 15th Honta Siro. 16th Ochako Uraraka. Kyoka Jiro. 18th Toru Hagakuri. 19th Denki Kaminari. 17th Minoru Mineta. 20th. The tiniest of them let out a pitying, "No." Izuku shot him a pitying look. Without the unusual application, he most likely would have failed as well. He wasn't the fittest individual. Deku. Izuku turned to his boyhood closest pal, sighing, "Bakugo." At that, Katsuki flashed him a leveled gaze and hissed. After stating his desired outcome, the blonde stormed off. "Don't get too comfortable. I'm going to beat all of these extras and you." Izuku wrinkled at his words. For whatever reason, the blonde singled him out even though he hadn't even placed first. Too engrossed in his inner monologue, he failed to hear Aizawa clarify that the threat of expulsion was a hoax. For him, the first day of school is over. Izuku approached the school gates with a swagger in his step. Despite a few bumps along the way, it was the best first day he'd ever had, and he was happy to accept that. He was one step closer to his objective now. "Midoriya-san." He paused, blinking, and turned to face the voice. "Iida-kun?" The taller boy approached him, grinning. "We got off to a rather rough start. I was hoping you'd allow me to rectify that and possibly walk with you." He had never gone on a walk with anyone before, but even though the boy had annoyed him during the tests, he had expressed regret and was making a concerted effort to make it right. Izuku was unable to refuse that. He grinned and said, "Iida-kun, that would be nice." "Hold on." Uraraka hurriedly approached the two. She pouted, "I want to walk with you guys too." Izuku stroked his head as Iida nodded. On his first day, he had already formed two fascinating friendships. "By the way, Zu-kun. Can I call you that? Why did that blonde angry guy call you Deku?" asked Uraraka. "It's a nickname, right? Are you too close?" With a slight grimace on his lips, he shook his head. "Well, no, we're not close anymore," he shrugged in response. Deku was in. "I don't particularly enjoy the childhood insult he called me, which wasn't a nickname." Iida turned to face him and made this amusing hand gesture. "So he is insulting you when he calls you that? He's a bully then?" Uraraka asks, "Why don't you stop him? I tried before. But Bakugo is too prideful to ever admit when he's wrong, so I just ignore him." When he answered, the two simply nodded. When Katsuki turned and marched out in the opposite direction from them, no one noticed that he was waiting outside for Izuku. They would never know till he went off, the following day. Izuku sat with his notebooks dispersed all over the desk in front of him throughout class. After that tumultuous first day, their classes were fairly normal, which confused him but also made him feel relieved. Glancing forward, Izuku furrowed his brow at the sight of the rear of a well-known blonde's head. Izuku thought that there was something strange about the other person ever since he came. Even though the blonde's moods never worried him, he couldn't help but observe that the boy had distanced himself from her. He was hardly left alone by the blonde. The door was flung open and his idol emerged in a very dramatic fashion before he had time to think any more about it. "I am entering through the door like a normal person." Izuku gave that a gentle laugh. It was All Might, All Might. As All Might entered the room, he looked over the class, stopping momentarily to stare at his well-known, dark hair that had a green tint. With the new haircut and all, he had almost forgotten that he had informed Nedzu about the little child. Though he was a little glad to be instructing the boy, he didn't want to show any preference. "Today, each of you will participate in your first ever combat training." Simulation. The students applauded, which made All Might smile. And naturally, without these, this wouldn't be finished. With those words, Little briefcases bearing precise numbers were launched from the walls. "Our hero costumes!" exclaimed Kaminari. He smiled as they all gushed over being able to wear their costumes at last. "That is correct. The school had gone ahead with your costume designs and had them made early on for you. Now, move quickly to obtain." Shift. Izuku peered down at the contents of his briefcase. "I sincerely hope I don't appear foolish." Izuku walked along the hallway, wringing his hands uncomfortably. He was very careful not to appear foolish in front of his new classmates and friends. He liked the way he looked, though, so that would have to settle for something. Correct? Yes, he thought to himself. As soon as he stepped outside, a rainbow of colors welcomed him. His classmates looked fantastic in their superhero outfits. "Zu-kun, you look hot." With the largest smile, Uraraka bounced up to Izuku, who felt his entire body flush. He felt himself shrink as she gave him a wolf whistle. It was really awkward. Now, he had the entire class staring at him. He had chosen a black, full-length, form-fitting bodysuit for his outfit. A long black cape sprang out from behind his waist, reaching his ankles and fastening to his wrists. Several portions of his outfit, including his elbows, shoes, gloves, and chest, were painted white. In addition, the costume had a high collar, giving the impression that a choker was around his neck. He had a magnificent appearance. As they walked over, a redhead whistled. As Izuku bowed his head, he smiled and said, "You look good, man. I was never able to go on a cape, but it really suits you. You look incredibly macho," he said, giving a thumbs up at the end. A little of his heat disappeared at the mention of the cape, and he glanced down at it. "It's more for practical use than anything really," he murmured. After hearing him, the redhead said, "You still good. I'm Kirishima, by the way." Izuku gave a slight smile and nodded. Midoriya. "Nice to meet you, Kirishima-kun." The boy with red hair, who was now called Kirishima, gazed at the smaller boy for a bit longer than was appropriate. "Right." Uraraka glared at Kirishima. After glancing between the two, she discovered something intriguing. At that moment, his other friend Iida approached them and gave Izuku a hard look. "It's practical, but all black? Won't you get overheated?" Uraraka said, "It has white in it." Izuku shook his head and laughed a little. "The temperature never bothers me, no matter how cold or hot it gets." The word, "cool," was shared by Kirishima and Uraraka. Too soon, All Might was back in front of the class. He drew them in and started outlining the drill. "All right, everyone. First of you will be all broken up into teams of 12, half heroes and half villains," he said. "Those who are villains will guard a nuclear weapon, and the heroes' goal is to stop their schemes. If the heroes capture the villains or retrieve the weapon, you win, but if the villains manage to keep the weapon until time runs up or they capture the heroes, they win," he said. The students nodded, understanding the purpose of the activity. He stepped to one side to display the box and stated, "Now I'll have you draw from lots and see who'll you be facing." Izuku took a step forward and reached in when it was his time. He thought, "Please don't be Bakugo," multiple times. He takes out one of the cards and looks at it. "Kirishima Ejiro." "Huh," he murmured. "That wasn't all that horrible." He approached the child who was surveying the area to see whether anyone had recognized him. He cried out, waving to catch the other person's attention. "Kirishima-kun. I got your name. We're teammates." He cried out, "Sweet. I was hoping we would. You're easy to get along with." You too." Once the drawing was complete, All Might spoke again. With a motion towards the screen, he declared, "I will announce the matchups now." The mention of his name made Izuku tense up. Among all the hero pair, Izuku Midoriya and Ejiro Kirishima Ochako Uraraka and Katsuki Bakugo are the villains. He faced not just Bakugo but also a friend in this situation. He was certain now that there was someone who detested him. Izuku sighed and looked to the other lad. "Plan?" as he observed Kirishima and the villains being escorted inside to be ready for them. He was about to ask him if he had one, but Kirishima seemed open to any suggestion he made, so he blinked. Yes, I do. Well, I do. Hey, sweetheart. I'm listening intently. It was during his explanation of the idea to the redhead that Izuku began to think he liked his classmate. The boy was kind. Perhaps we could become friends later. They discussed one another's peculiarities, with Izuku immediately formulating plans to blend them. Before long, their allotted time had elapsed, and they were inside the structure. They moved down a corridor, keeping a watchful eye out for anything. Then, if he was correct, Izuku sensed it before the assailant even materialized, and he moved quickly to seize Kirishima's hand and pull him away in time to see an enraged figure leap around the corner and launch a projectile at the location where he had been. Whoa! The explosion had forced him and his partner to the ground after they had been a bit too near. Izuku wheezed as Kirishima landed awkwardly on top of him. The youngster was hefty even without his quirk active, he thought. I'm sorry, Kirishima said, scrambling off the smaller boy and helping him back up. They both turned to raging the blonde. You were right, Midoriya. Bakugo did pursue us. At that, Katsuki snarled before turning to face Midoriya and yelling, fight me. Even though Izuku had anticipated it and had planned for it, he was nevertheless taken aback. He looked at his teammate, and Kirishima gave him a nod before scuttling away and down a different hallway. Best of luck, Midoriya, he said over their communication link. Come at me then, Bakugo, Izuku said, nodding before turning his attention to the threat in front of him. That infuriated Katsuki, who erupted, saying, stop calling me that, Deku. He threw himself at Izuku with a lunge, his palms getting hot. Izuku anticipated the other's moves by tracking the current's motions and anticipatorily covered his body in electricity. Katsuki realized too late what was happening as Izuku avoided his left arm and jumped before spinning and kicking him in his side into the wall. The kick itself didn't hold much power, but it was the electricity coursing through it that really had Katsuki hissing in pain. Izuku knew he couldn't outmatch the other physically, but with each hit he could hopefully connect. Katsuki will feel the shock from his electricity. I'm not a Deku anymore, Bakugo, he yelled. I never was. And I'm gonna be a hero. Katsuki snapped. I told you to stop calling me that. To be continued. I can already tell most of you won't like that I completely changed Izuku's hero costume. Cringes. I'm sorry, but this is a slightly different Izuku from what you know. And I truly thought about keeping his original look, but I just don't think it'll look good with the cape idea I had in mind. And yes, the cape is important. It's actually supposed to help him. You'll see later. Bo's head, let me know your thoughts, even if you hate it. I'm sorry, but it won't be changed. Until then, plus Ultra TT Chapter 5. Hey everyone. I'm back again with an update of Stormbreaker. I gotta say though, this has been going really well. It feels easy just writing this, it kinda just flows. Guess that's why updates happen so frequently. But we're experiencing some bad weather here, go figure. And I was super bored, which led to me writing more chapters. Anyways, I know for sure I love to read during stormy weather, so here you go. But first, the reviews. Seika Grandolin. I didn't mean to cause any deaths with that XD. But call me Demi. Author-san sounds so plain. Feel free to add any honorific you wish. Bard of the Glade. TT, you have no idea how much I needed to hear that. Thank you so very much. Feels like a weight has been lifted. Bless you. Lightning Blade 49. LMAO, hopefully after this chapter you'll like Bakugo just a little more. He has a lot to say. Plasma Dragon 312. Osmagod XD. That just made me laugh, thank you for that. But I hear your thoughts, and I understand, but the cape is supposed to help him, not hinder him, so don't worry so much. And no, he won't be receiving one for all. Mike 202303. Arigato, SO82829. You're really perceptive, I've noticed that from all your reviews. And yes, the cape will help balance him out. It isn't for show, or a hindrance, it's meant to help. That's what their costumes are for, to help them better use their quirks. Wreckboy. Glomps, I don't want to play favoritism, but I love all of your reviews. And isn't Kirishima, Izuku just the freaking cutest thing ever? Love crazy hedgehog. Lul. I'm glad. Fin fish Jun Tenshi. He is just like her carrot. Wait, Thor's new hammer is called Stormbreaker? I actually really didn't know. Funny enough though, Storm wielded a hammer also called Stormbreaker. Legion's Guardian. Haha, that's one way to look at it. But Todoroki doesn't really use his quirk like that, he's more physical with it. Uchiha Naruto 247. Yeah, this is a boy ex-boy story. I pointed that out in chapter 2 so if anyone was uncomfortable with it they would have a heads up. Fire Arrow Ace. Ah. Arigato. TT Pokecharmer 007. I'm glad you do, and yes that is exactly what the cape is for. This review just made me so happy. D3LPH0XL0V3R. LMAOXD. It would have been nice to see it in canon, give Izuku a little more development. But I still like the Izuku we have now. And yes, they tied. For right now I strangely can't seem being stronger than each other just yet. They need more time to grow. I'm really glad you love the costume though carrot. Hardcase Sakara. You don't have to thank me for responding, I should thank you for letting hear your thoughts. I'm just going with how I think Izuku would be if he wasn't put down by Katsuki as they grew up, but I'm glad to know I'm doing a good job. Lol, now that you brought up Denki and Todoroki I was thinking of a scene with them and Izuku. Smoky CZT. I'm so glad you do, and yes, the cape is for balancing on the wind. Pedro Faria 339. What brought on this question? Far as I know Thor and Storm's power are vastly different. Kiritima. Lol, I'm glad you like it so much, and we're done. Just to point out a few things. Izuku doesn't get one for all. Zuku's quirk is a lot like X-Men's Storm. Izuku's cape is not going to be a hindrance to him, that's all. Disclaimer. I don't in any form or shape own BHNA. Sadly someone else does. Thunder versus explosion. Izuku felt his blood run cold at the blonde's words. The air shifted around them. Deku. The blonde bellowed, and Izuku flinched back at the other's volume. It was like the blonde was roaring at him and Izuku felt fear race down his spine for the first time ever from being near Katsuki. With a lunge, Katsuki aimed a kick at Izuku's head. Stop calling me that, you nerd. Izuku found it surprisingly easy to catch the other's leg, despite the fear clinging to his senses. The blonde was unhinged, his attacks were predictable, and Izuku didn't know how to feel about that. Katsuki was all rage. That's your name, isn't it? So why did he find himself answering back? Running on pure instincts, Izuku sent currents of electricity throughout the blonde's leg making him hiss in pain. But not allowing to be deterred in the slightest from the pain, the blonde swept his arm in a wide arc sending a wave of explosions to Izuku's face and sending him hurtling down the corridor. I'm in, Kachan. Coughing, Izuku pushed up on his arms and glared at the blonde. We haven't been friends since preschool, why would I call you that? Midoriya. He heard the voice of his teammate calling out to him worriedly, but in his state all he could focus on was the raging blonde in front of him. Slowly he pushed to his feet, wiping half-heartedly at the scratches on his face. You haven't been my friend, but I never stopped being yours. Any other time Izuku would have froze at the words, and then talked to the other calmly. However, this wasn't one of those times. Who the hell calls their friend useless? Katsuki. He screamed at the blonde. The blonde stilled at his words. Slowly he raised his arm and positioned his left gauntlet at Izuku. Is that why you didn't want me to call you Deku anymore? He asked, but he wasn't really looking for an answer. You think I would think of you as a friend or a rival if I thought you were useless? His words shook Izuku, and he found himself taking a step back. You think I would be so bothered by you telling your stupid ass friends you were just ignoring me all this time if I thought so little of you? At the end of it, Izuku found himself trembling. I call you Deku because it's the only proof we were childhood friends. Why, you heard that? Izuku found himself asking despite all the word vomit the blonde just dropped. Huh. Of course did. 'Cause like an idiot I thought we could walk home together, he raged, letting everything out. And I could have apologize and maybe fix things again. Izuku twitched at that, and lowered his head. What's stopping you from doing it now? Katsuki scowled, and placed his hand around one of the pins on his gauntlet. I'm going to blow you up first, beat your ass, then maybe apologize afterwards, you stupid nerd. Raising his fist, he met the blonde's gaze steadily. He didn't come this far to lose. Bring it on then, Kachan. Scowling, because Katsuki never smiled, he explained about his gauntlets to the other, and blatantly ignored All Might's warnings. Nerd. Insufferable idiot, and he pulled, and Izuku clapped. KKKKKRAABOMMMMMM. The sound of a thunderclap and an explosion meeting head-on rang out, destroying the entire corridor the boys were in and shaking the entire building as well. Luckily, it didn't collapse on itself and bury the teens inside. Shit, All Might swore under his breath. As the dust cleared up, two silhouettes became visible. Panting heavily, the two boys glared at each other. Due to the explosion they had fallen 2 stories down and were now on the ground floor. Izuku coughed, and stumbled on his feet. Midoriya, are you alright? At the worried tone, Izuku blinked and finally remembered his teammate. The whole building shook. Was that you and Bakugo? Why aren't you answering, dude? Midoriya. Shakily he raised his arms and touched the comm in his ear. I'm fine, Kirishima-kun. He answered, and there was a sigh of relief. I may have gotten a bit carried away. Are you okay? Ah, I'm fine, he answered. Actually, I'm better than fine. I'm great. Izuku could feel the grin from where he was standing. Midoriya, we won. At this, Izuku blinked, and sure enough All Might's voice rang out. Hero team wins. Well, how did that happen? He must have said it out loud because Kirishima was already answering him. Well, it was really hard dealing with Uraraka alone, and when you hadn't shown up I figured the plan must have went awry. He explained, and Izuku sunk to his knees as the redhead's words brought him back down to reality. So when that explosion shook the building, I took a chance while Uraraka was distracted and grabbed the weapon. It wasn't very manly, but it paid off. He laughed, and Izuku found himself laughing along with him. I'm so glad, he whispered. He had forgotten all about the exercise. He was just glad that he hadn't managed to harm his friends due to him and Bakugo clashing. Speaking of the blonde, Izuku took a glance across the room. Baku. He stopped when he noticed the angry tick marks on the blonde's forehead and his veins bulging. Lost. He screeched. Izuku's sweat dropped. Izuku? He met the blonde's gaze. Sorry. Smiling, Izuku titled his head and scratched at his head. Call me Deku, Kachan. Said boy twitched and angrily stomped off. I was going to, even if you didn't tell me to, nerd. Izuku found himself laughing as the blonde retreated elsewhere. They weren't best friends again, that was obvious, but maybe in time they would be. Maybe back in the viewing room after him and Kirishima had caught back up with each other, they found themselves back with their classmates as All Might gave them their evaluation. Despite the odds, you all did well, All Might said to Kirishima and Uraraka, while Bakugo and Izuku stood side by side looking put out. They had been properly chastised by All Might and Yaoyorozu on how they had battled using their quirks in such a way. That is why I believe you two are the MVPs of this battle trial. At this Uraraka squealed, and Kirishima smiled a bashful smile before rubbing at his head. You deserve it, Kirishima-kun. Izuku spoke up from behind the boy. You were awesome. Super manly, he said, trying to compliment the boy and flushing furiously. You think so? The redhead breathed, then grinned when Izuku nodded. Thanks, bro. And without any prompting he draped an arm around Izuku's shoulder and pulled him closer. Bro hug. Izuku spluttered. Kirishima flushed a little. Katsuki rolled his eyes. After that they all gathered around to watch as the others completed their trials. Well, Izuku and Kirishima did. Bakugo stood off to the side and grumbled to himself. More often than not, Izuku began muttering to himself and writing down everything he could about the new quirks he was seeing and how best they would match up with him. It's a high possibility he'd probably have to team up with some of them for assignments, so Izuku was already formulating ways to combine their quirks. "Oi, Midoriya." Kirishima nudged the boy lightly, drawing him out of his thoughts. "Did you also come up with combination attacks for you and I?" he asked. He really wouldn't mind working with the other more often, he was just so manly. Huh, that doesn't sound like the right word to describe him, he found himself thinking. Of course. Izuku's eye brightened. I thought of a lot of ways our quirks can complement each other. Really? Your quirk is really cool, Kirishima-kun. We'd be awesome together. Kirishima found himself flushing at the innocent words. Right. Nodding, Izuku turned back towards the screen as the next trial was beginning. He had no idea of what he had done to the poor redhead beside him. He was too focused on the boy who had his entire left side frozen in ice. That was an odd hero costume. What was the reason behind it? Just like the rest of the class, Izuku watched in awe at the incredible display of the boy's quirk as he single-handedly froze the entire building and the villains all in an instant. As quickly as it had began, it was already over. His hands clenched around his notebook. There were some really strong people in his class, but he should have expected it. This was the hero class after all. For some reason, Izuku felt really small all of a sudden. He wanted to get better. He wanted to be strong like that as well. He was going to get stronger. Later that day after classes were over, Izuku walked along to the gates surprisingly alone. He was so into his thoughts he didn't notice the person in front of him, and ended up walking right into him. Oomph. Whoa. He felt a pair of arms grabbing onto his shoulders and steadying him before he fell. You alright, dude? At the voice, Izuku opened his eyes, which had shut after he had crashed into the person. Kirishima-kun. Smiling that toothy grin, the boy pulled him closer and draped an arm across his shoulders. Yep. I was waiting on you. Let's walk together, yeah? Oi. I'm in, here too, you shitty-haired bastard, a familiar voice growled out. Haha. I forgot. Looking past the redhead, Izuku found Katsuki standing there with his hands shoved in his pockets and a scowl etched on his face. Kachan? He felt his friend twitch against him, and Katsuki smirked. Nerd. We're walking home together. Ha? Izuku stammered. Kirishima looked between the two and frowned. Say, Midoriya. Back in the trials you weren't calling him that name. Did something change? It's none of your business, shitty hair, Katsuki growled. Kirishima met his glare. Dude, I don't want any trouble, but Midoriya is a friend. I'll make it my business if I have to and make sure you don't trouble him. Katsuki bristled, and smoke rose from his palms. Huh? Kirishima felt his skin hardening in response. Under Kirishima's arm was a spluttering mess that was once known as Izuku. Hold on, you guys. Kirishima shifted his gaze from the blonde and down to his friend, Midoriya? Izuku quickly shook his head, hoping to defuse the tense situation. It's not what you think, Kirishima-kun. Kachan isn't going to do anything to me. Katsuki relaxed only slightly. Kirishima, however, frowned and furrowed his brows. Why do you call him Kachan? Blinking at the question, Izuku looked up at his friend. It's a childhood nickname. It's a really long story. Nodding along, he spared the blonde a glance. So you're just childhood friends? And if we aren't? Katsuki asked with a smirk. Kirishima wanted to punch the other boy. We're friends, Izuku said. Just friends. It sounded like he was saying it more to himself than the other two. Kirishima repeated the words in his head, and Katsuki rolled his eyes. You two are idiots, he scoffed. Can we go now? Izuku perked up at that and nudged the redhead beside him. You don't mind, right? He rubbed at his chin with his other hand and shrugged one shoulder. Sure, bro. Bakugo can walk with us. What the? Okay. Izuku smiled and walked ahead, leaving from under the redhead's arm. Just his second day and he was making more friends, and fixing past friendships too. It couldn't get any better than this. Unbeknownst to him, however, the boys behind him glared heatedly at each other as they walked away from the school. Unaware that just around the corner was an end to their peaceful times at UA. To be continued. What do you guys think about Katsuki? And what about Izuku's answer to his apology? I sure hope you weren't too comfortable with the tension between them, because it wasn't supposed to. Last. It was just to make Izuku grow a little, and not have his self-esteem so low. What do you think of their friendship? And tell me what you think of Kirishima. Did I capture him right? He's a really cool L guy, so I don't want to mess him up. I'm sorry this chapter is a little short, I'll make it up to you with the next one. Until then, plus ultra, chapter 6 surprise everyone. I'm giving you all a double update, carrot. The weather is still bad here of course, but that only fueled my imagination further. Can't believe I've reached chapter 6 already. I'm impressed with myself honestly, but it's coming along nicely though. Since I answered all the reviews last chapter, let's get right into it. Disclaimer. I don't in any form or shape own BHNA. Sadly, someone else does. In the eye of the storm, Izuku slumped on his desk. He had gotten up at some god-awful just to make it to school early. Actually, he was forced awake by a particular blonde banging on their apartment door and screaming at him to wake the up. Sighing to himself, he shot a tired glare at the blonde in front of him and all he got was a scoff in response. While it was not so bad the blonde was actively trying to be friends again, he didn't entirely want to be woken up before he deemed it was necessary. Soon their homeroom teacher makes his appearance, and not missing a beat he immediately announces that they're going to be picking their class representative. Again, it's such a normal thing that it completely throws Izuku. The entire class erupted into an uproar at the declaration. They all wanted the position. It was the perfect opportunity for them to gain extra recognition. A small part of him wanted the part as well, but a larger part of him detested the idea of being in the spotlight. It was a weird feeling, because he wanted to be a hero but he didn't want all the recognition that came with it. He just wanted to save people honestly. In the end his friend Iida suggested they all take a vote. He probably expected a different outcome, and truly, so did Izuku. Just how again did he become class representative? I voted for you bro. His friend Kirishima cheered. So did I? Uraraka piped in. As did I. Iida begrudgingly admitted. He was probably regretting it, and Izuku really couldn't blame him. Fortunately his deputy representative happened to be Yaoyorozu, so he was grateful for that. He could count her if anything. Flushing slightly, he bowed at the waist in front of the class. I'll do my best. Later as lunch rolled around, Izuku found himself seated between Katsuki and Kirishima while Iida and Uraraka took the seats in front of him. It was a mixture of completely different personalities all gathered in one spot. Doom was inevitable. The round face. I told ya I ain't got any beef with the nerd, so stop poutin' at me. This only made her glare harder. Iida tried to placate them of course, but his words fell on deaf ears. Please, this is hardly appropriate. Kirishima paid them no mind whatsoever. Oi, Midoriya, you wanna share some of that? It looks good. In response he wrapped his arms around his Katsudon, and glared a little at the redhead. Sweat rolling down the side of his face, Kirishima raised both his hands. Forget I asked bro. Izuku's expression lightened and he went back to enjoying his lunch. He had noticed the tension in the group, but he couldn't be bothered to deal with it. Not when he had a perfectly good bowl of Katsudon to enjoy. Soon the tense atmosphere did a whole 180 as the topic of heroes was brought up. Iida practically gushed about his older brother, the pro-hero Ingenium, and Uraraka excitedly told them she really admired the rescue hero 13. Kirishima told them he really looked up to the past pro-hero Red Riot, and Katsuki and said he didn't have any since they were all stepping stones anyways. Izuku of course told them all about All Might and how he wanted to be just like his idol and save everyone with a smile. Kirishima gave him an odd look at that. while Iida told him it was a splendid goal to go after. Their excited chatter was cut short as the school alarms abruptly went off. Someone in the cafeteria pointed out this meant that someone had infiltrated UA. It only caused mass panic as everyone tried to evacuate all at once. Izuku found himself separated from his friends, as he was pushed and shoved outside into a corridor. Hey, please calm down. No one paid him any attention, all too preoccupied with getting out. He was about to try again when a shadow flew over his head, and a loud bang drew his attention to the front. Everyone, Iida-kun. Please, calm yourselves. He shouted. There is no need to panic, for it is only the media that has managed to get the gates. We are UA students. Let us behave as such. At his words, murmurs were heard throughout the crowd as they all calmed down and returned to whatever they were doing prior. Izuku smiled to himself, coming to an easy decision. Later on, when they were all gathered in their class once again, Izuku made his way to the front. I just want to say thank you again for voting for me to be your class representative, he began, and prodded at his cheek with a finger. But, I'm gonna have to resign. Bro. Why? Zu-kun, are you sure? Taking a deep breath, he plowed on. I've made my decision, and so I'm nominating Iida-kun as class representative instead. Smiling to himself, he glanced to his shoes. I was really moved by his actions earlier at lunch, and by the way he effortlessly grabbed everyone's attention and calmed us down. That's why I believe Iida-kun will be the perfect representative. Iida smiled at his fellow friend's words, and the class cheered for him. I happily accept, thank you Midoriya. Izuku gave him a big smile in response. Beside him Yaoyorozu sighed and mumbled to herself. What about me? You're all prolonging this. Shut up, Aizawa tired voice grumbled. After that was over, they settled in once more. Then Aizawa got up once again, and sluggishly turned to them. Class representative, get everyone changed and lined up outside, and with that, he made his way out and left the class. Springing upright, Iida did as told. And with these funny hand gestures, he had everyone changed and lined up outside in front of their school bus. Soon they were all piling in, messing up Iida's orderly line and arranging themselves how they pleased in the seats. Kirishima's happily snags a seat beside Izuku and relaxes. As the bus drove off, they all started talking about each other's quirks. Actually my quirk isn't all that flashy. I probably won't be that popular of a hero, Kirishima says. Izuku nudges him to get his attention. I think your quirk is powerful enough to make you into a great future hero. Flushing slightly at the praise, he rubs at his head. Haha, thanks bro. But still, you, Todoriki, and Bakugo's quirks are all perfect for becoming professionals. It's Izuku's turn to flush now as he twiddles his thumbs. Thanks Kirishima-kun. A voice beside him spoke up. It was Asui. I think Bakugo is always too angry to become popular though, Kiro. The hell did you say? See? Izuku snickered, and Bakugo sent a glare his way. Ah, you're right. Another student spoke up. Another blonde named Kaminari. Bakugo's personality is steeped in garbage. It could use a lot of work. Huh? They all laughed. All too soon they arrived at a large training facility, and as they got off the bus they were greeted by the rescue hero 13. Uraraka squealed. The hero led them inside the facility, giving us all a rundown on what it's for and the different areas stimulate different disasters. I know you students probably think beating the villain is the most important thing, but you're wrong, she said, turning to face us. Protecting and saving the citizens should always be your top priority. Her words leave the students in a state of awe, and Izuku can see why his friend looks up to the hero. But then he feels it. It was subtle, so subtle he would have missed it if he wasn't so intoned with the elements. The air shifted, and through a large portal, herds of villains leisurely made their way into the facility. Is this a part of the training? One of the students questions. Izuku watches as their homeroom teacher pulls down his makeshift scarf, and places strange goggles upon his face. 13 Evacuate the students and contact the others, quickly. She nods, and call for the students' attention. Izuku ignores this, and steps forward, because his sensei was about to engage in a battle he surely couldn't win. There's too many of them, Aizawa sensei. Looking over his shoulder, Aizawa's expression lightens. Have a little more faith in your teacher, Midoriya. And with that he leaps down into the fray, his capture weapon gripped in his hand, and engages the enemy. Izuku watches as the man erases the villain's quirks and quickly takes them out. Maybe he had been wrong to worry. Aizawa sensei looked like he knew what was doing. Still, behind him, his classmates cried out in surprise, and Izuku whirled around to see a mass of black mist blocking their path. I'm sorry, but we can't allow you to leave to call for help. The disgruntled voice carries over all of them. Villain! 13 exclaimed, and activated her quirk. The effect was instantaneous as it began drawing in the black mist. It was ruined, however, when 2 students charged at the mass. Die. Izuku watched as both Katsuki and Kirishima jumped at the villain, only for their attacks to pass through him harmlessly. Physical attacks were useless, it seemed. Boys! At their intervention, 13 quickly stopped her attack, afraid of getting them caught in it as well, and that gave the mist a perfect chance. Quicker than they could follow, the mass moved, and 13's cry of pain made them freeze. In one quick motion, the villain had taken down the hero and their protection. My name is Kurogiri, member of the League of Villains, and we're here to kill All Might. As soon as the words were said, Izuku found the blast mass at his feet and felt himself sinking. Midoriya. Looking up, he found some of his classmates in similar states. Before he could fall all the way through, he locked eyes with a terrified pair of red eyes. And then he was gone. First thing he realized is that his movements felt heavy. Opening his eyes, he startles upon noticing he's in water and flails about uselessly. Izuku freezes when he notices a form cutting through water and heading straight for him. He panics when he notices it's a villain, and begins flailing all over again. You're mine! The shark-like man screeched. Before he could make contact with Izuku, however, he's slammed into by a pair of webbed feet and sent careening away. Or not, he wails. His savior, Asui, wraps a long pink tongue around his waist and pulls him along to the surface, where she safely places him upon a small yacht. He hears a thud beside him as something is dumped harshly, and he looks up to see Mineta rubbing his head. Asui soon joins them, and they all breathe a sigh of relief to be around familiar faces. Their relief is shattered when more villains make their presence known. From every which way, they were cornered. Looking to his companions, Izuku decided, we're going to have to fight our way out of this. He gets mixed reactions. Asui nods her head, agreeing with him. While Mineta freaks. Are you crazy? We're kids, he exclaims. What can we do against all these villains? It's a good question, but Izuku could do without the panicking. We're heroes in training. He actually snaps. He thinks about what Kachan would say. So we kick their asses. Maybe a bit too much like Kachan, but it calms the boy down. Looking down at the villains, he notices how they don't make any moves to confront them. What are they waiting for? He wonders. We should explain our quirks to each other, find a way to use them together, Kiro. Asui speaks up, and he nods. So they explained their quirks to each other, and when Mineta's turn came around they stared at the boy in silence. Unnerved by it, the boy freaks and throws one of his ball thingies into the water. Wait! He shouts, but it's too late. The reaction, however, is not what he expected. The villains were suddenly very wary of the strange ball. They didn't know about their quirks. That's why they hadn't attacked yet, and why the black mist sent Asui to a simulation where her quirk would flourish. They had an advantage. A small one, but an advantage nonetheless. Suddenly a giant fist formed out of water breaks the ship apart, and Izuku grits his teeth. They needed to act now. Asui-san, call me Suyu. Kiro, I have an idea. She nods and he informs them of it. Pulling away from them, he faces the villains and steps onto the railing of the ship. Villains! He shouts, grabbing their attention while Suyu grabs Mineta and prepares to jump. Not needing a response, Izuku leaps up, and as he descends he quickly starts spinning and forms a funnel cloud. As soon as it touches the water, the villains suddenly find themselves thrown about by the violent waves and pulled towards the vortex despite their struggling. What the hell? Leaping into the air, Tsuyu waits for her chance and admires the versatility of Izuku's quirk. Mineta frowns. Spurred on by Izuku's actions, Mineta hurled his black spheres into the vortex as well. "I can be hero too," he screamed while crying. The villains found themselves being stuck against each other, and Izuku dropped the vortex as the villains became one writhing mass. Before touching down into the water, he quickly spread his arms and his cape fluttered as it caught the air currents. Smiling to himself, he flew up and exited the area beside his other two classmates. After landing a measured distance away from the shipwreck zone, the three huddled close to each other. "I think we should probably head to the class, Kiro." Izuku nodded. It would make sense. The villains were mostly gathered around the central plaza, so it would be best to avoid that area. But that was also where their teacher was battling on his own. "I think we should help Aizawa-sensei." Kiro. Tsuyu made an unsure sound. Mineta shook his head. "Wouldn't we just get in his way? He told us to stay back." Izuku bit his lip at that. He doesn't know how to argue against that, but something just didn't feel right. They began to move forward, but stopped when their sensei was attacked by one of the leaders. Izuku gasps in horror when he sees the leader's quirk peel away at their sensei's elbow. The man quickly kicked him away to gain distance, but it was short-lived as the monstrous form of another villain appeared behind him faster than he could blink and grabbed his head. "Sensei!" Both Tsuyu and Izuku screamed as they watched the creature slam Aizawa's head mercilessly into the floor. The impact of it created a small crater, and blood was slowly pooling in it. He wasn't even moving. "Nomu, keep him there. I'll deal with the children." Despite the distance between them, Izuku still managed to catch his words. Flinching, he turned to the others to warn them, but what was cut off by Tsuyu's panicked cry. "Midoriya-chan," she cried, and her tongue darted out towards him. And then he felt the shift. It was so fast, quicker than he could properly react. He looked over his shoulder to see a hand reaching towards his face, and his heart squeezed in terror. Another hand was reaching towards Tsuyu's tongue as well. "This is how I die," he thought. Then the hand gripped his face, and also Tsuyu's tongue, but nothing happened. Then Mineta exclaimed, "Aizawa-sensei," and it all suddenly made sense. The man had somehow managed to save them at last minutes. But then the villain's next words made his blood run cold. "Take care of him, Nomu." Izuku knew then he needed to do something, and fast. If their sensei stopped his quirk now for whatever reason, they'll most definitely die. Then he heard the sickening crunch of bone breaking. On autopilot, his hands sparked. ZZZZZTTTTTT. The leader's body sailed through air and crashed on the ground in a twitching mess, his form racked with residual energy. "Nomu, kill him," the man screeched. Then Izuku felt his hands gripped in a crushing force, and immediately felt his wrists snap just from the strength of the grip. "Ah!" he cried out, and looked up through teary eyes at the hulking mass in front of him. "Kill him now." The USJ's door flew open at that moment, and a figure stepped through. "Do not fear." Izuku found himself crying for a whole new reason now. "Why? Because I am here." All Might was not smiling. To be continued. Quickly escapes because of another cliffhanger *+ ultra. Chapter 7. Hey guys. Back again with an update already on Stormbreaker. Before we get into that though, I just need to point out a few consistent things. 1. Yes, Izuku's power is like Storm's too. He will not be like the character Thor, and he will not receive one for all. 3. Yes, this will contain yaoi, boy, like I said in Chap 2. If you don't like that, I'm sorry, but you've been warned. Again. That will be all. Now to answer some reviews. Sortuop. Lol. You just gave me so many ideas. I can't even keep track of them all. Finfish Juntenchi. I'm glad you're enjoying it so much. Son of Ophion. I'm so glad you're still enjoying it. D3LPH0XL0V3R. I'm glad it doesn't. And I'll try to keep it interesting. Plasma Dragon 312. Yes. You're the first to guess right. Mike 202303. What is it? Classy J0K3R. Lol. That's a perfect way to repair friendships. Can I thief that? Love Crazy Hedgehog. Really? I don't really think he has any type of filter, but I'll try to keep it at a minimum. Iron Slayer Dragon. Ah, I'm glad you do. Pokecharmer 007. OMG. Are you serious right now? Did I just assume someone's gender? ATT, and I know who Krona is. I love him, her. Whatever. Lightning Blade 49. Yeah, it's going down that route. I think Izuku would definitely be able to stand against a Nomu, if this wasn't his first major villain encounter and he didn't just watch his sensei be brutalized. Ghost Shot 84. Are you asking if Katsuki and Kirishima are gay for Izuku? Well, only one of them is. BioRL. A lot of what fanfics, and I apologize, but it will contain yaoi. Jack Redhawk. Someone mentioned that before, but I really don't know what it looks like. I'm really glad you like the costume though. Gino07P. I changed it because I wanted Izuku to experience that terror. What other events have I drastically changed? Keep in mind this isn't canon, but a story. Hardcase Sakara. Lol, the scene between Kiri, Katsuki, and Izuku was a complete accident. I hadn't even planned it, but I don't regret it. Of course we already know Yagi has a bit of a soft spot for Izuku, so I'd say pretty much level 11 on the rage meter. And of course I'll respond, I like interacting with you all. Seika Grandolin. XD. I guess I'm stuck with Demi-san, but that's alright. Thank you so much for your kinds, they're truly appreciated until next chapter. Plus Ultra. On with the story. Disclaimer. I don't in any form or shape own BHNA. Sadly, someone else does. Strike back. As soon as All Might appeared, he was gone as he tore through the villains to reach Aizawa and us. It all happened so fast it nearly gave Izuku whiplash. Take care of your sensei, said the hero, placing a hand on Izuku's shoulder. All Might, it will be all right. And with that he turned back to the two villains, and then he was a blur again. It was hard to keep track of him, but he was facing off against the hulking creature. Something seemed off, however. No matter how many blows it was struck with, the creature shrugged it all off. Nomu's quirk is shock absorption, the leader supplied, slowly getting to his feet. He was specifically made to kill you, All Might, he laughed. Izuku felt helpless as he watched his hero struggle against the villain. Turning away, he set his attention on his teacher. He could help him, this was how he'll be useful. Carefully, he lifted one hand over his shoulder and Suyu did the same with the other hand. It was a painful task to do, with his wrists the way they were, but he managed. Before they could move forward though, Izuku saw out of the corner of his eye that All Might was planning to suplex the villain. But no impact followed the move. Confused, Izuku turned to see just what happened and gasped. The warp villain had prevented the move, and now the Nomu creature had half of its body inside the black mist and the upper half had All Might's stomach gripped tightly. They were planning to drag him in halfway then close the warp, successfully cutting the hero in half. Izuku knew that even without hearing the villain. Mineta, was all he said as he set Aizawa in other boy's grasp, and then he was off before they could try and stop him. His wrists still throbbed in excruciating pain, but he pushed through it. With the winds at his beck and call, he flew towards his idol in seconds. He didn't know what he could do, but he knew he had to do something. Then Izuku sensed it. Now that he was familiar with its movements, he knew what to look out for. So with a quick twist, he expertly flew over the warp gate that appeared in his path, avoiding it and also blocking a certain someone from view. And then, as if they had sensed All Might needed help, Bakugo, Kirishima, and Todoroki appeared. The tables quickly turned as Bakugo pinned the warp villain, and Todoroki used his ice to free All Might. Kirishima tried to sneakily attack the leader, but he was quickly avoided. Izuku knew how dangerous he was, however, so while he still hovered in midair he channeled electricity throughout his body. With his wrists broken, he couldn't shoot the blasts from his hands, but he was not limited to just them. Spinning in midair, he rained down bolts of lightning from his body, all centered on the leader. The man cursed under his breath, and tried his best to avoid them. He somehow managed to evade most of them, but a few shots still got him. Nomu. Just like that, the creature sacrificed its own arm and immediately it grew back as if nothing happened. Then it lunged at Katsuki, who still had the villain pinned. Kachan. Even as he spun and continued his onslaught against the other villain, he could still see what was going on around him. His heart nearly stopped when the creature reached the blonde, but somehow All Might had gotten between them and took the blow. Now that the warp villain was freed, he quickly disappeared and also took their leader with him, then reappeared a safe distance away from them. Noticing his target had gotten away, he slowly descended and stumbled into a pair of arms that wrapped securely around him. "Hey, you okay, bro?" Izuku felt himself relax in the hold. He knew that voice. Just a little tired." Kirishima nodded, and tightened his hold a little as he went back to surveying the fight. All Might had engaged the enemy again, and they were exchanging blows back and forth. The recoil of them was even strong enough to nearly throw the onlookers off their feet. Izuku felt the redhead shift behind him, and then he was being dragged from the two heavy hitters. He would have protested, wanting to witness what happens, but he understood why they needed to move. It wouldn't help to get in All Might's way, not right now. "Remember these words, creature." His voice reached their ears as the creature bounced from the impact it made with the ground. "Go beyond, plus ultra." And with a devastating punch, the Nomu creature was sent hurtling away through the roof and into the clouds until finally disappearing from view. It was over. They won. Izuku breathed a sigh of relief, and fully slumped against Kirishima, who for his part didn't complain, just shifted slightly. All Might stared down the remaining villains. He declared their league of villains was now over. He boldly tells them to come face him, and they hesitate. The leader panics and scratches at his neck as he takes a step back. However, the warp villain surveys the scene more carefully. Just as Izuku was about to turn away from the scene, the villains made a mad leap towards All Might. He was about to dismiss them, thinking All Might could dispatch them easily on his own, but then he noticed his idol's prone figure as they closed in on him. He wasn't moving. Why wasn't he moving? Izuku felt his body react as the leader's pale hand reached towards All Might's chest and the man still hadn't moved. He was so tired, he couldn't even get out of Kirishima's grip. So tired, and in so much pain. But that was all right, he didn't need to get close. He just needs to aim correctly. And for the first time in a long while, his eyes glowed a bright white as the clouds swirled and darkened above the USJ facility. And suddenly, almost out of nowhere, a blast of lightning shot down between his idol and his attackers, successfully cutting them off. Unlike the other times, however, the bolt didn't came and went. Instead it raged between them, and the villains took a shaky step back away from it. Above them all, thunder roared loudly, and it almost seemed like the lightning was alive and telling the men to back down. Slowly, the villain with multiple hands littered around his body, turned his gaze to Izuku. The glare he sent his way so full of hate, but then it gave way to pain as shots ran out throughout the area. At the turn of events, Izuku's head snapped to the direction of the sound to find UA teachers all gathered at the door with Iida in tow. His eyes slowly faded back to their usual vibrant green and the sky brightened once more. Once again, they were saved. "You?" a voice growled, and Izuku turned to see the leader glaring pure murder at him. "I won't forget this." And with that the two of them disappeared. And finally, Izuku gave into the darkness. Midoriya. In the infirmary, Izuku woke with a start, and scrambled upwards only to be halted by a hiss of pain. Blinking through the small tears, he peered down at his hands to find them bandaged. Slowly he began to take in his surroundings, and realized he was in the school's infirmary. "I see you're finally awake," a voice chirped, and Izuku flinched before turning to the sound. "Your friends were awfully worried about you after you lost consciousness." Izuku turned his head back down to his hands, and slowly flexed his fingers. He slowly started to recall the events of the USJ attack, and frowned. Is everyone okay? He didn't say who, but he felt somehow that he didn't need to. Smiling, Recovery Girl nodded. They're all fine. Some more fine than others, but they'll pull through, she informed him, and he released the breath he had been holding. However, he stilled at her words. Since I didn't get to heal your wrists right away, there will be a little scarring. Izuku found his breath again, and gave her a small smile. Is that all? I'm okay with that, honestly. She turned away from him with a hidden smile. Good, because there is someone who wanted to speak with you. She lifted her cane and rapped against it the wall several items. And then All Might came through door. I am here, he declared, to thank my student for his strength and bravery. Izuku spluttered, and covered his head with his hands. All Might. Young Midoriya. His idol smiled and walked over to him. I am glad to see you doing fine. You gave your classmates a fright when you passed out. He placed a comforting hand on his head. I was also worried. But I've known from the time we first met that you were strong, he grinned. So thank you, my boy, for what you did back there. Izuku was a stuttering mess. Why you're welcome. All Might ruffled his hair. I must go now, I just wanted to see that you were fine. He turned away and made for the door. Continue to grow strong, my boy. And with that he left. At his departure, Izuku made a strangled noise and flopped on his bed. Recovery Girl only shook her with a fond smile. You're free to go whenever you feel. Ah, really? Izuku asked, peeking out from behind his hands. She nodded. With that, Izuku got up and got changed in a small room before making his way towards the door. Before leaving, he peeked over his shoulder and smiled. Thank you very much for healing me. She gave him a soft smile and shooed him away. Upon stepping out, he quickly noticed the other's presence and tilted his head. Kirishima-kun. Ah. The redhead quickly shot up from his crouched position beside the door and tucked away his phone. Midoriya, you're okay. He gave him a tight hug, then pulled back to look him in the eye. You're all right, right? Izuku laughed and nodded. I'm fine. What are you doing here? Pulling his arms away, Kirishima scratched his head. I wanted to make sure you were good, dude. Then his eyes lighted up as he remembered something. Oh. Bakugo waited for you too. But then he left mumbling something how strong the nerd is and how he'll make him pay for waiting around like an extra or something. Izuku shivered. He wasn't looking forward to the blonde's sour mood. Want to walk together? Blinking, he looked to the other boy who was smiling a small grin and smiled back at him. Sure. Reaching out, Kirishima draped an arm around his shoulders and pulled him in. Bro hug. He grinned and Izuku laughed and gave him a light nudge. They made their way out of the school. And along the way, Kirishima never removed his hand. Instead he just pulled the shorter boy closer. To be continued. I'm in a mood. A moody mood. The kind of moody mood that has me feeling moody. That's why this chapter is kinda short, but I'll bounce back. Been going through some stuff, it's meh. Tell me your thoughts, constructive criticism is appreciated. Until then. Plus Ultra Chapter 8, I'm finally back again, with an update. I really hope y'all haven't grown bored of this in my absence. That would. On another note, I've been going through my recent reviews. And one thing sticks out the most. Izuku's duality in this fanfic. What is the problem? Truly, this is a fanfic, and I cannot stress that enough. Did you really expect things to be the same? I'm not discussing this anymore, nor am I changing it. So if a gay character influences what you read, have fun with that. On a more important note, who else has a crush on the big three? I know I do. Fin Fish Jun Tenshi. Yes, phase 1 of my diabolical plan is working. Seika Grandolin. I feel the psalm. Imagine how I felt just writing that scene. It was badass. Plus Ultra. Reefler. There's something wrong with this story because it has gay characters. Noted. Do I care? Can't really say that I do. Legion's Guardian. Because there's not enough of this pairing, and so I'm contributing to it. The storyline was just an added bonus really. Dio over heaven. Too late love crazy hedgehog. I meant that he doesn't consider how appropriate or inappropriate his words are, and just says whatever he feels like. W1 Liam. Okay, your review didn't immediately irk me, so that's good. Still, this is a fanfic. You know that, right? It's not really supposed to be like canon. And IDK if I'm going to produce a whole new version for those who just don't like yaoi. Son of Ophion. You're right, I needed to hear that, thanks. Hardcase Sakara. Lul, you're making this into a whole Deku bowl and I gotta say I like where your head is at, plus ultra. Wreckboy. God, I'm such an otaku. I was listening to a fairy tale lost while reading your review and it just stood out even more. It was perfect. Thank you for your kind words, and I'm glad you're still here to enjoy the story, plus ultra. And that's it, I don't want to label anyone homophobic, simply because I don't know you. But I will say this however. Handful of those reviews was just downright homophobic, and I am so not having that. Keep it very far away, please and thank you. Disclaimer. I don't in any form or shape own BNHA. Sadly someone else does. I am here. The day after the attack, UA gave us all a day off from classes. The students of 1A especially were grateful for this. Izuku however, wasn't. The hell do you mean physics make your head hurt? Sighing, Izuku watched as his two friends bicker back and forth about classes, heroes, and whatever else they felt should be argued about at this moment. Why exactly did he let these two talk him into hanging out with them again? Katsuki and Kirishima were currently on Izuku's bedroom floor engaged in a heated argument over physics of all things. When the two had shown up earlier that day together, Izuku had been understandably confused. Apparently they didn't plan to both show up at the same time, it just sort of happened. And with that, they happily entered his home and proceeded to barge into his room. He didn't mind their presence, not one bit, but he really could do without the bickering. It was going to be a long day. The next day propped up on his elbows, Izuku idly twirled his braid as Kirishima talked to him about hanging out again, just the two of them. It probably didn't help that Katsuki was right behind him, but the redhead didn't notice, or care. Said blonde growled and shot the redhead a lethal glare. Huh? You got a problem with me being around, shitty hair? Kirishima only laughed from his perch on Izuku's desk. You know our hair is really similar, right? So that means. Izuku banged his head on his desk. At that moment, their mummified homeroom teacher entered the classroom and everyone quieted down. S-sensei? Uraraka broke the silence. Are you sure you should be here? Aizawa nodded. I'm your homeroom teacher, where else would I be? And as if that answered everything, everyone relaxed in their seats. Save Kirishima, who was hopping off his desk and making his way to his seat. Clearing his throat, Aizawa swept his gaze over the whole class. All right, despite the attack that took place at USJ, classes will still be held normally. Several groans were heard at the declaration. But for now, you should focus on something more important. The UA Sports Festival. Isn't that a little too soon? Considering, no, this is one of the most viewed events in the world and a major opportunity to get scouted by professional hero agencies. Murmurs broke out throughout the class at this. Katsuki scowled. So basically, it's too important to cancel, Aizawa nodded. After that, class continued on like usual, and all too soon it was time for lunch. Still in their class, the students discussed the upcoming sports festival. As a class they all decided to put the incident behind and instead focus on the festival. Fired up, Uraraka declared to the whole of the class that she was going to do her best and puts her game face on. Izuku laughed lightly at this, and spurred on by his classmates' actions he also declares that he was going to do his very best. You think you're going to beat me, nerd? Didn't he win against you in the battle simulation? Katsuki choked. It was a goddamn draw. Kirishima laughed and nudged Izuku. I'm not going to lose to you either, Izu bro. Smiling, Izuku clenched his fist. Then let's both do our best, Iijiro-kun. The redhead felt his heart stutter and nearly give way. From his spot, Katsuki watched the two with a familiar scowl. You two deserve each other. Shitty nerds. Izuku spluttered and covered his head. K-Kachan, TCH. Unbeknownst to the trio, a pair of heterochromia eyes watched their exchange. Soon though classes were over. Getting up from his seat, Izuku grabbed his bag and slung it across his shoulders. Hey, Midoriya. Blinking, he looked over to see his blonde classmate approaching him. Kaminari-kun. Smiling, the boy gave him a thumbs up. Hey, can I ask you something, man? Nodding slowly, he agreed. Sure. Tilting his head, the blonde scratched at his head. Well, I kinda noticed that you could produce electricity from your body like me, and it got me wondering. He trailed off. Izuku smiled. You want to know how I don't short-circuit my brain? Kaminari breathed out. Yes. Laughing, Izuku shook his head. Well actually, my quirk doesn't have a drawback like that. Izuku watched as the boy's expression drops and hurries to finish what he has to say. But I always limit my output so I don't accidentally fry someone with it. Kaminari shot him a confused look. Limit your output? How would that help me become stronger? Well, if you controlled your output you should have a longer use of your quirk. That way you won't short-circuit from going overboard, and it'll give you more control. At each word the blonde's eyes widen. You really think I could do that? Izuku nodded, and shot him an easy smile. I think you could be really strong with your quirk, Kaminari-kun. By now his eyes were sparkling. You're the best, Midoriya. Thank you, he said while rubbing his cheek. If you want, I'd be happy to train with you before the festival. That'll be awesome. Kaminari wasted no time agreeing. Thanks man. No problem. Izu bro. Turning away from his classmate, now friend. Izuku saw Ajiro waving him over. We walking together or what? Of course, he beamed. Turning back to Kaminari, he smiled. I'll talk to you later? The blonde nodded, and took out his phone. Gimme your digits, so we could link up whenever. Okay. Izuku agreed, and they exchanged numbers. Making his way over to his friend, Izuku noticed the way he was watching Kaminari. Ajiro-kun? Snapping out of it, he turned back to his friend. Hey, what was all that about? Smiling, he told him about what the blonde had asked and how he agreed to train with him. Furrowing his brows, the redhead stared at the ground. Then you won't mind if I tag along too, right? That'll be great. Perking up, he grinned. Awesome sauce. Will you two idiots hurry the up already? An angry voice broke through their conversation. Turning away, Izuku noticed the blonde waiting by the door. We're coming, Kachan. Grumbling, the blonde turned away and opened the door, only to be barricaded by a horde of students gathered outside their class. So this is Class A1? They don't seem like much. Did they really fight against villains? Some of them are at least good-looking? The entire class sweat dropped at their murmurings. They do realize we can hear them, right? Jiru questioned. Why are they all gathered outside our class? Uraraka squeaked. Scowling, Katsuki leveled them all with a glare. They're here to scout out the competition, he says, and suddenly the focus is on him. Extras, move out of our way. Kachan. Izuku spluttered. The blonde just shrugged his shoulders. So this is Class A1? A voice carries out over the crowd. I guess you're right when you say I came here to scout out the competition, though I don't know about the others. A purple-haired boy emerged from the crowd to stare down Katsuki. Though I'm not really impressed with what I see. The blonde's scowl darkens and Izuku steps forward to prevent any fights from breaking out. Sighing, the boy rubs at his neck. Do you know that if we other students do well in the festival, we could be moved into the hero course? He receives several looks of shock from his question. Course you don't. I plan on taking your place in the hero course. And I'm not going to let any of you get in my way, he says, declaring war on the entire class. Spurred on by his declaration, another student abruptly shouts his own piece as well. I wanted to see the class that defeated real villains, but all I found was condescending students. TCH, Katsuki disregards them all. You're all just shitty stepping stones for me to make my way to the top. Several heads banged on their desk at his words, while others groaned. You're just going to make them hate us all the more, Bakugo, Iida says. What does it matter? The blonde shrugs, and instead of facing Iida he looks directly to Izuku. It's only important I beat all of you at the festival, he says, then turns away to cut through the crowd. Clenching his fist, Izuku watches the blonde's back. I plan on beating you too, Kachan. Hurry the up already. See coming. 2 weeks later. The day of the sports festival had finally arrived, and Izuku was more excited than nervous. Everyone was so pumped up, it made him want to stand out and try his best. He was here to be a hero just like All Might, and this was his chance to show them all. Beside him Ajiro and Kaminari were animatedly talking about the day's events with each other. During the 2 weeks when they trained, the two had gotten pretty close. They were bros. As they so happily pointed out, it was a little weird, since Ajiro always carried this weird tension whenever the blonde was around during the first few days. Weird indeed, but not unwanted. Smiling, Izuku turned to them to join in the conversation when a voice behind him cut him off. Midoriya. Looking over his shoulder, he saw his classmate Todoroki watching him. T. Todoroki-kun. The room quieted. Midoriya. The boy said his name again, and regarded him coolly. In terms of power, I believe I'm much stronger than you, he declares, much to the surprise of his classmates. But for some reason, you have the number one hero's attention. Clenching his fist, he glares slightly at Izuku. That's why I will defeat you in the festival. Izuku for his part is at a loss of words. This was the first time the other boy had even spoken to him. Stepping in, Ajiro tried to defuse the situation, but Todoroki only shook him off and walked away. I don't think you're stronger than me, Todoroki-kun. At his voice, said boy pauses. I don't really understand what you meant about All Might, but I know that I'm much stronger than you. Izuku gives him a fierce look. But everyone here is going to be trying their best, that's why I can't lose to you. Watching him over his shoulder, Todoroki nods and walks off to his corner. Izu bro, turning back to his friend, Izuku watches as several emotions pass over the redhead's face. You're really cool, you know that? Flushing all the way to his ear, Izuku stuttered, "Eh." Behind them Kaminari snickered at his own inside joke as he watched the pair. Soon they're all walking out to the freshman stage of the festival stadium. Izuku watches as all the other classes gather around them at the podium, and turns to watch as Midnight makes her way onto stage as the chief referee. He freezes momentarily when his and Katsuki's name is called to lead the pledge. He almost forgot the two had tied for the number one spot. Ajiro gave him a slight nudge forward, and Kaminari gave him a thumbs up. He could do this. Probably. Making his way onto the stage, he stood beside his blonde friend and looked out to the crowd. Breathing in, he glances at the blonde to see if he wanted to say something, but instead the boy only shoved him forward. Righting himself, he grabbed the microphone. Hello everyone. Silence ensues. Swallowing, he continues. I know all of us out here have our own goals in mind, but one thing we share in common with each other is that we want to win today. So I wish everyone the best, to reach beyond the stars. P+ Ultra. The students and onlookers erupted into cheers at the end of his words, and Izuku smiled and stepped away. Before he could move, however, Katsuki yanked his hand holding onto the microphone and glared at the students. Despite what this nerd just said, I'm going to kill all of you shitty extras. And just like that the cheers changed into loud boos. Izuku sighed and pulled away his hand and followed his friend off the stage. He really shouldn't be surprised at this point. Joining his two friends, Izuku watches as Midnight takes the stage once again to explain the preliminaries. They were going to take part in an obstacle race 4 kilometers around the stadium. They were allowed to use their quirks, of course. As long as you don't leave the course, you're free to do whatever to your heart's desire. Midnight exclaimed, cracking her whip. Begin. Immediately everyone raced forward towards the entrance, no one wanting to be left behind. But due to their haste and the tight corridor, they all got packed in together. Realizing this, he jumped into the air just about the same time Todoroki chose to freeze the pathway and raced out ahead. Remembering his words from earlier, Izuku gathers the wind around his feet and rockets off behind him. Landing lightly on his feet and not losing any of his momentum, Izuku gives chase. He notices several of his classmates had also avoided the other's boy move and were gunning for them both. Deku. Smiling to himself, he took great pride in knowing he had gotten ahead of Katsuki this early on. He just needed to pass Todoroki and maintain his position in the lead. "You think you two are so cool?" a voice behind him squeaked. "Don't count me out just yet, Todoroki, Midoriya." Looking over his shoulder, he sees Mineta gaining on them by bouncing on his balls. Just as he's about to pass them, however, he's suddenly batted aside by a villain bot that came out of nowhere. Skidding to a stop, he finds their path blocked by other villain bots. Todoroki, though, reacts quickly and freezes the bot in front of him off balance and runs under it. But Izuku realizes his ploy, and quickly follows behind while the others stare in amazement. Unperturbed by the cold, Izuku makes it out from under the robot just as it crashes down. Pausing briefly, he picks up a stray part from the robot and then continues to steadily close the gap between himself and the other boy. And just like that, 2 students of the hero course clear the first obstacle easily. Noticing his approach, the ice user sends a wall of ice in his path to slow him down. Gritting his teeth, he pulls the winds toward himself and spins. A tornado gathers around him and launches Izuku right over the large hurdle. It seems Todoroki isn't going to make it easy for Midoriya at all. They both went through the same thing, they've grown and learned to not hesitate. Again he lands lightly on his feet and approaches the second obstacle. The fall. A canyon that can only be navigated along the tightropes. Pausing, he notices Todoroki skating across the ropes by using his ice. Wow, his quirk is so useful. And his physical abilities make him stand out even more, the onlookers voice, as they watch from their seats. But the Midoriya boy is really light on his feet and quick thinking, "You're right." With a burst of wind at his feet, he leaps across into the canyon, then repeats the action again when he lands until he reaches the end of the canyon. To onlookers he looked a bunny hopping across the canyon. And Midoriya doesn't let up in his relentless path to first place. The sound of explosions quickly approaching makes him quickens his pace to the final obstacle. And neither does Bakugo. Gritting his teeth, he determinedly tries not to look back. Up ahead he notices Todoroki slowed his pace to safely cross the minefield. Quickly taking advantage, he pauses to let Katsuki blow past him and grabs the robot part from across his back. What? Why did Midoriya stop and let Bakugo past him? Eraser head. How exactly should I know? Grabbing onto the strap attached to the part, he braces himself and pulls the winds to him once more. This time he lets it flow under the part, and as a result he's launched into air and gaining on his 2 classmates. Standing upright, Izuku guides the part along the air currents for as long as he can. It would be so much easier to do with his cape, but he'll have to make do. What's this? Midoriya is seemingly surfing the air currents. He surfs over the 2 prone figures below him, as they stopped to stare. And Midoriya just took first place. Immediately the 2 sprang forward, their focus entirely on the boy ahead of them now. As he began to slowly descend, Izuku glanced over his shoulder as the 2 quickly approached. He had to time this just right. Just as he was close to landing, he pushed down and let the plate go right onto a mine right before Todoroki and Katsuki could pass him. The explosion was enough to give them pause, and also push Izuku to the end of the path. Using the force from the explosion, Izuku spun and let it carry him all the way before landing and rolling, then shooting off again. Just what are you teaching these kids? This is just them pushing each other, their desire to prove themselves. I haven't taught them anything. Racing down the corridor, Izuku panted heavily. He really worked himself hard back there, and his stamina was slowly running out. The goal was in sight, and so close. He just needed to push himself a little more. Just a bit more and he'd win. The approaching pair of footsteps gaining on him only pushed him forward, so with a last burst of speed, he surged forward to cross the finish line. To be continued. Omake. Yawning, Izuku made his way towards the familiar clearing he had been training at with Kaminari and Ajiro. So far they had made steady progress together, despite the tension. He really didn't know where that came from at all. Stepping into the clearing, he noticed the two standing awkwardly beside each other and sighed. Walking forward, Izuku watched as the two noticed his presence and broke out into huge grins. Izu bro. Midoriya. Morning guys. Smiling at the two, he clapped his hands together. Ready to start. Yosh. They both chorused together. He laughed as they both stared at each other in surprise. From then they all began their training. Izuku showed Kaminari how to properly feel out and guide his electricity, while Kirishima worked on strengthening his quirk. Like this? No. No, Izuku shook his head, then he got an idea. Ajiro-kun. Come over here. Walking over, the redhead stood beside his friend. What's wrong? I was wondering if we could borrow you for a little. Ajiro eyed the blonde, and then turned back to Izuku. How can I help? Well, we need your quirk. I think Kaminari needs a more hands-on approach, and with your quirk you shouldn't get hurt, Izuku explained. Shouldn't? The redhead arched a brow, and again shot a suspicious glance to the blonde who quickly raised his hands and stepped back. Wouldn't, he quickly corrected himself, you wouldn't get hurt. Kaminari sighed when Ajiro took his suspicious gaze off of him and smiled at Izuku. Alright then, let's do this. Immediately after he hardens up. Okay Kaminari, just watch me and do what I do, Izuku says, and pulls forth the familiar currents. Gathering it in his palms, he gives the redhead's shoulder a light tap and sparks erupt from the contact. A hero's brow gave the slightest twitch before straightening out once more. That's it? Nodding, Izuku turned to Kaminari. Just now I channeled a light spark to my hands, and sent it into Ajiro-kun's body. Izuku explains. If it wasn't for his quirk, he'd be momentarily paralyzed. What? Don't worry Ajiro-kun. I wouldn't put you in danger like that if I didn't know what I was doing. Hearing this, Ajiro felt himself relaxing. I want to try. Then immediately tensing up again. Good. Stepping forward, Izuku held out his hand towards the blonde. Try it out me, we don't want to hurt Ajiro-kun. But won't it hurt you? Before Izuku could answer, Ajiro pulled him back. Are you crazy? You could get permanently paralyzed, he exclaimed. He doesn't know what he's doing. Hey. Shaking his head, Izuku placed a hand on his friend's shoulder. You trust me, don't you Ajiro-kun? The redhead nodded. Then let me do this. Besides, it won't hurt me. The same way electricity doesn't bother Kaminari-kun, it doesn't bother me also. That's so cool, the blonde exclaimed. We're a lot alike. Ajiro twitched at that, and Kaminari gave him a look. After that, Izuku had Kaminari try it out on him and true to his words, it didn't affect him. After several tries, the blonde got it down. Hey, I feel like I can better control my output. The technique is also helpful in that way. It's a good way to learn control, Izuku smiled. I knew you'd get it. Ajiro felt a sour feeling surging in his chest as he watched the two interact, and knew immediately what it was. He was jealous. Turning away, he made to walk back over to his spot but a hand on his shoulder stopped him. Looking over his shoulder, he saw Kaminari sporting an uncomfortable look. Away from them stood Izuku working on his quirk. I just want to point out that, the blonde gulped. Midoriya and I are just friends. He's really cool, but we're just friends, he said, staring right into a hero's eyes to get the message across. Ajiro felt his shoulders relaxing. You're not. Nope. He's a cool guy and all, but I'm not interested like that. Ajiro nodded. Thanks for telling me. Kaminari grinned. Besides, I don't stand a chance, Laughing, the blonde turned and walked away, leaving behind a confused redhead. What does that mean? The blonde only continued to laugh. Just a little bonus for you guys. I love the stoplight trio, and I just had to make them close in this. Do you guys like it too? I don't really have much to say, so look out for the next chapter and let me hear your thoughts. Until then, Plus Ultra Chapter 9. Hey guys. I'm finally back with an update. I'm really sorry about the wait. My keyboard been acting up and we had to throw the whole damn thing away. The new one is here, and I've been dying to get back to y'all. Let's get it. Fin Fish Jun Tenchi. I think they're the only ones who doesn't know what's going on with themselves. 2-star. Thank you so much, Plus Ultra. Gallifrey Denizen. You think so? I'll try to change it up. Hard Sakara. I'm so glad you still like the story and the interactions between the characters. I hope you enjoy this update. Seika Grandolin. I love that you're still enjoying the story. Your reviews are always kind and much needed. Thank you. Plus Ultra. Kamui Senketsu. Welcome to my madness. I'm glad you're really enjoying it. And yes, Storm is a big inspiration to me in this story. Plus Ultra. Guest. IDK who you were, but that's okay. I really appreciate your kind words. I just wish I knew who to thank. Plus Ultra. Silly Mongoose the Third. OMGTT, I'm crying. That was funny XD. Wreckboy. Aw man. I can always count on your reviews. I really like the stoplights thing those three have, and I think they would be really nice friends if they interacted more. Bakugo is an added bonus really. P.S. Sorry for the cliffhanger. Plus Ultra. You guys, I need help. I've become obsessed with watching BHNA crack. It's just too funny. Pray for me. Please. Disclaimer. I don't in any form or shape own BHNA. Sadly, someone else does. At the top is where I'll be. As soon as he crossed the finish line, he was assaulted by the sound of applause echoing around him. And Midoriya crosses first. The applause only got louder, as the spectators all began cheering for him. A little dazed from it all, he ducked his head and smiled a small smile. He did it, he said he would, and he did. And coming in second is Todoroki. Hearing this, he glanced up to see the other boy panting a few ways from him, and third, Bakugo. He beat them. He beat both of them. Izuku gave a little cheer to himself, and his blonde friend scowled at him. You just got lucky, he roared, then marched off as others finished the race. Soon they were all gathered together as Midnight explained the second round event. The cavalry battle. All the students who qualified had 15 minutes to make teams of 2 to 4 people, and everyone's point value depended on their placement in the obstacle race. Which means, Izuku gulped as he felt all eyes on him immediately. Your teams will be worth your members' accumulated point value. The objective of this round is to steal as many points as possible and raise your team's points. The battle will only be 15 minutes, and only the top 4 will advance to the finals. Midnight cracked her whip. Any questions? If they were, no one voiced them. Good. Now team up, she barked, delighted to see them scamper about. Izuku knew already the one person he definitely wanted on his team. The problem was trying to locate the teen. Turning every which way, he finally located a familiar shade of red. Ajiro-kun. He practically bounced up to the boy. Team up with me? The redhead smiled and rubbed his head. Izu bro, I'd love to team up with you, but I won't. Izuku felt his smile slip off his face. Huh? Frantically Ajiro waved his arms about, not wanting a misunderstanding. Nothing against you or anything, you're my best bro. He grinned. But I want to beat you, Izuku. Izuku blinked. Beat me? Well, you see, taking a breath, the redhead looked Izuku in the eyes. I kinda noticed how determined you were to beat Todoroki and Bakugo. You were really fired up, and it was like those two were all that mattered. He clenched his fists at his sides. I get why you'd want to beat them, they're both strong, but Izuku, I'm strong too. Grinning, he raised one of his fists and pushed it against Izuku's chest. I wanna beat you Izu bro, so come at me with that manly spirit too, yeah? Izuku looked at his friend, and willed his heartbeat to shut the hell up. Mimicking the other, he also placed a fist against the other's chest. "I'll give it my all, Ajiro-kun." Smiling, Ajiro nodded and walked away. Spurred on by his friend's determination, Izuku set off to find some teammates. He somehow managed to get Uraraka, Hatsume, and Tokiyami. Well, more accurately, they got him, since they came up to him. Uraraka had approached him because she wanted to stand out more, and the best way to do that was at the top. "It also helps we're already friends too, Izu-chan," she had said. Hatsume Mei had brashly asked to join his team, hoping to use his first-place status to show off her creations, or rather, babies. He didn't see a reason to turn her down, she could be helpful. Their third and last member was the most baffling. Tokiyami had approached them while they were deciding who to choose, and he just inserted himself. Nobody really questioned it, since Tokiyami didn't explain why exactly he joined. And now, with all that out of the way, Izuku stood at the top held up by his team members. Uraraka stood to his right, Hatsume at his left, and Tokiyami alongside Dark Shadow stood at the front. After every team was formed, they all stood ready for the chaos that was about to descend. Raising her hand, Midnight swept her gaze across the field and licked her lips. "Begin." Everyone charged, and majority made a beeline for Izuku's team. Uraraka. Right. Activating her quirk, she lightened them all and Izuku propelled them all upwards with a burst of wind. However, they weren't out of danger yet, as Juru used her earphone jacks to go after them. Tokiyami quickly reacts, and bats them aside using Dark Shadow. "Your quirk is so cool, Tokiyami-san," Izuku praised, and the hybrid boy smirked. They landed a few feet away from the battle, but danger was always around the corner as Shoji charged towards them. He nearly made the mistake of thinking he was alone. That was until those familiar spheres were hurled at him. Quick thinking on his part is what saved them, as he redirected their trajectory away from them. Now Hatsume. "Time to shine, my babies," she grinned, and clicked some switch. Immediately the jet boots Tokiyami's feet flared to life and they skidded across the field at a shocking speed. When they came to a stop, Izuku breathed amazed. "Your babies are amazing, Hatsume-san." The girl grinned pleased at this. Deku, out of the frying pan and into the fire. Izuku bit his lip as Team Bakugo barreled towards them, familiar explosions popping in the blonde's hand. Looking away, he noticed Ajiro leading the charge in his hardened form and he found himself momentarily distracted by the grin on the redhead's face. "See cute, Izu-chan." Midoriya. Snapped out of his thoughts, Izuku squeaked at Bakugo's close proximity. The blonde had jumped away from his teammates to make a grab for Izuku's headband. With quick movements, he summoned a quick gust under the blonde that sent him skyward and away from them. Immediately the blonde was struck by a piece of tape and reeled back towards his team. Izuku wasted no time to put some distance between them. Chancing a glance over his shoulders, he caught a hero's eye as his team lectured Bakugo. The redhead sent him a quick grin before moving off again. "What happened back there, Izu-chan?" Uraraka asked. I just got a little distracted." He rubbed his head and smiled. "It won't happen again, guys, sorry." Subject dropped. They put their focus back on the battle. Team Midoriya seems to be doing well keeping their spot at the top. Out of the corner of his eye, Izuku noticed Class 1B's assault against 1A, and relaxed slightly. "I think we can play it cool for now, they won." As if called, Team Todoroki confronts them cutting off their path. Regarding him coolly, Todoroki gestures to the headband on his head. "I'll be taking that 10 million now." Clenching his fist, Izuku stared back. Soon they were being surrounded by other teams, but with a jolt of electricity and a blast of ice they were all halted in these spots and had their headbands taken. Now it was just Team Midoriya and Team Todoroki again. Kaminari sent him a quick wink, and he knew what was coming. Tokiyami. As soon as the jolt came, Dark Shadow was out and deflecting it. Gritting his teeth, Tokiyami drew back his companion, Midoriya. Izuku nodded, and looked to the sky. He remembered what the other team told him about his quirk, and he already devised a quick way to help him out. His eyes changed from their usual green to a startling white, and on command dark clouds began to darken the sky. Is that good, Tokiyami-san? The team nodded his head in approval, and Dark Shadow cheered. Yahoo! It was dark enough for Dark Shadow to be stronger, but also enough for Tokiyami to keep control of his quirk. Every move Todoroki made, Izuku was able to thwart him. If they kept this up, time would run out soon and they'll keep their first place. All they had to do was stay on his left side. Of course the plan sounded well and good, but a sudden shift in the air and a burst of speed had him recoiling in shock. Hatsume. Quick! The boots on Tokiyami's feet lit up again, and they barely dodged Todoroki's outstretched hand, but then Iida was turning and suddenly they were stuck in place by the ice at their feet. That was all they needed, as Todoroki quickly snatched their headband. Gritting his teeth, Izuku glanced at the timer to see how much longer they had. Maybe we should go after other headbands? Tokiyami suggested. Not much time, we can't gather enough. Looking down at his team members, he frowned. Do you guys trust me? He asked, while he worked on freeing their feet. Of course. Let's get our points back. Yes, Tokiyami nodded. Good, cause we only have this one chance. To accompany his words, there was a low rumble of thunder that made Todoroki instantly wary. With great control, Izuku made it rain just around them. A heavy downpour blinded Team Todoroki's vision, and the members of Team Midoriya, but Izuku could see just fine. Now, what's this? The weather is scheduled to be sunny. Midoriya. He's getting better at controlling his quirk. No longer does it affect everyone in the vicinity but only who it's meant to affect. Hatsume fired one of her grappling into the wall behind Team Todoroki, and Uraraka made them all lighter. Kaminari. I can't. We're all soaked. I don't know what to create or where to aim it. The jet boots lit up once again, and with a blast of speed they blurred past them, grabbing two of their headbands along the way. Skidding to a halt, Izuku lets up on the downpour and looks at his hand. He got it. The 10 million points was back in his grasp, along with 70 points as well. And Midoriya secures back first place, placing Todoroki in third. Looking behind him, Izuku was immediately locked in a fierce glare by Todoroki. Steam was rising around them, drying their forms. They were preparing for another move. Deku. A familiar bellow pulled their attention to the sky as an angry blonde descended upon them. And here comes Bakugo into the fray. Ah! Just as he was about to reach them, the buzzer sounded. Timmy. With a flop, Katsuki face planted. RRRRRRAHHHHH. The rest of his teammates soon joined him, and watched amused as the blonde yell his frustrations. And with that ends the cavalry battle. I'll list the 4 teams moving forward now. Izuku looked up at that. In first place, Team Midoriya. Uraraka glomped him and squealed loudly, while Hatsume gave him a brief thumbs up before going back to working on her babies. Tokiyami nodded with a small smile. It was exciting working with you. Izuku beamed. In second place, we have Team Bakugo. Mina, Shiro, and Ajiro cheered and high-fived each other, while their leader grumbled loudly. Izuku met a hero's eye, and gave him a hesitant wave. The cheery redhead responded with 2 thumbs up, prompting a laugh out of Izuku. In third, Team Todoroki. Todoroki clenched his fist, and glared at his feet. I'm sorry. Yaoyorozu smiled and shook her head. You did fine, no need to apologize. He nodded and turned away. Beside them, Iida wailed. I'm sorry. Yaoyorozu's sweat dropped. Their 4th team member bounced his way over to where Ajiro and Izuku stood. And in 4th, Team Shinso. Noticing the blonde's approach, Izuku grinned. Kaminari-kun. Hey. Congrats, dude. Rubbing his cheek, Izuku laughed lightly. Thanks, you were amazing out there. Yeah? Kaminari literally lit up. It's cause you're so cool at teaching? Izuku covered his head, causing the blonde to laugh at him. Congrats to you too, Kirishima. It must have been hard working with that hothead. The you said? Katsuki roared, stomping over. Kaminari jumped and hid behind Izuku. Don't let him eat me, you damn Pikachu bastard. Pikachu? Izuku laughed, and Ejiro smiled. Don't forget about me, Izu bro. Looking up at his friend, he smiled. Never. Unbeknownst to the two blondes, Ejiro and Izuku shared a deep glance before both their faces erupted into a deep red. Midoriya. At his name, the four of them turned to the newcomer. Todoroki-kun? Frowning, said boy flexed his hands. I want to talk, he voiced, then swept his gaze over the others, alone. To be continued, and here ends the second round. Next up, the one-on-one battles. Who's excited for that? I am, again. I am very sorry for the late update. Now that I have a new keyboard, updates should be quicker, hopefully. But what do you think of this chapter? I'm sorry I wasn't too creative with the teams, but this actually was already well balanced for Izuku with the quirk he has now. Also, sorry about the scene where they received the headband again, it wasn't that creative either. Forgive me. Tell me your thoughts, constructive criticism is appreciated, flames will be used to make s'mores. Plus Ultra, Chapter 10 High. Everyone, finally back with an update. Thank God, right? Really sorry for the inactivity. I was super busy last week and I only got to finally breathe now. Before we get into it though, I just want to address this thought. So I was reading this story, really good plot, and awesome character portrayal, everything you would look for in a story. But then, this is where the problem for me came in. Somehow the plot entailed Izuku being heavily scarred. I don't mean like a few unsightly scars, I mean some heavy body horror type **hash. I don't want to rant about this, because seriously, who am I to judge someone's story? But it just gets to me, you know? I mean, does the scarring have to be that bad for the story to progress? It's just, there are a lot of stories where Izuku is like a homing beacon for every bad injury a human body could possibly sustain and still live through. And I'm just like, why? Is it something I'm missing? Something I don't understand? Don't get me wrong, the stories are very good, excellent writing. It's just the heavy scarring that really gets to me. Yikes. You guys, tell me your thoughts. I really want to know if I'm just being too sensitive or whatever, or do you all somehow agree? I know Zuku isn't known as the safest person in terms of getting away with little injuries, but the body horror just seems a little extreme for his character. Now for the reviews. Finfish Jun Tenchi. Lol, I'm sorry. Cliffhangers really amuse me for some reason. And OMG. Ochako would probably make the best wingwoman XD. Dragon Slasher 02. Iker. Let Izuku live XD. I'm glad you're enjoying the story though. Yin Yang King. Thank you. I know this pairing isn't the most popular, but it really should be. There are grounds for it, you know. But I like your idea, actually I did that in another story with these two. You should check it out, see if you like it. Hardke Sakara. Dekubol Forva. XD Seika Grandolin. Gasp. No, I'm not going on hiatus, perish that horrible thought. If my update time changes, just immediately assume I'm busy. I haven't forgotten this story. Oh, you haven't guessed the pairing yet? Waggles eyebrows *L Mao. 2-star. I wholeheartedly take full responsibility for my actions. Do I regret it? Nope. Lol. As for my update schedule, IDK. Maybe once or twice a week if it all goes smoothly. Wreckboy. Yay, Team Midoriya. I need a shirt that says that, are they any? Someone let me know. Lol, the original interaction between Izuku and Shoto was always funny to me. Are you All Might's secret love child? LMAO, that just gets me every time. So I want to carry that same energy they had but just make it mine. Hopefully I don't disappoint. A clash of differences. That, Izuku groaned and tugged on his braid. Kachan. What the hell, Deku? Katsuki frowned and crossed his arms. Why the hell do you have to go alone to talk to this peppermint bastard? Kaminari piped up, shifting uncertainly. He's standing right there, dude. He voiced, gesturing towards the blank-faced teen. Katsuki only scowled. If Izubro wants to talk to him, who are you to stop him, Bakugo? Ejiro said. Despite his words, he still sent a suspicious glance towards the silent boy who still hadn't shifted his gaze away from Izuku. Smirking, the hot-headed blonde turned to him. Oh, yeah? What if this loser plans to confess? Ejiro froze up. Todoroki arched a brow. Izuku spluttered. And Kaminari cackled. Kei-Kachan, the blonde shrugged. Pouting, Izuku gave him a sharp glare, then turned to face the cause of this madness. Let's talk then, Todoroki-kun. Said boy nodded, and the two made to leave. What the? Izuku. I'll be fine, Katsuki, said boy paused at hearing his first name. Smiling towards his three friends, he turned away and walked off with the dual user. So, what are the chances Midoriya might accept Todoroki's confession? You little Pikachu mother fu. With Izuku and Todoroki. The two stood by the faculty entrance, both on opposite sides of each other. Izuku fidgets as Todoroki only silently stares at him, an uneasy feeling settled in his gut. Maybe I should have stayed with the others after all. Swallowing, he caught the other boy's gaze. You know, we should probably get lunch before time runs out. Todoroki only continued to stare at him, not bothering with a response. Izuku gulped, and shifted. Was the other boy mad at him for beating him in the cavalry battle? He quickly shook away the thoughts. That was ridiculous. Right? Your power. Lifting his head slightly, Izuku watched as Todoroki frowned as if he was struggling with something. You're able to create and control weather phenomena, correct? Izuku blinked, and rubbed at his neck. I guess? Yes? He answered lamely. I've never heard of a quirk like that before. Todoroki continued, scrutinizing the other boy. All quirks are different, they may carry some similarities but they're still ultimately different. Izuku swallowed, not quite sure where the other was going with this. But your quirk allows you to affect the world around you, and there are a lot of other quirks that do that, but none of them are as drastic as yours. Awkwardly, Izuku shifted his gaze every which way, refusing to meet the boy's gaze across from him. What exactly was he even trying to imply right now? That his quirk was so powerful it was unfair? Well, that seemed a little hypocritical. A new quirk, that hasn't been recorded yet in history. The ability to affect nature. Todoroki pushed himself off the wall, backing Izuku up against the opposite wall as he cornered the other boy. Are you? Furrowing his brows, he looked down at Izuku as he shifted nervously. Are you a demigod or something? A slight breeze blew past them. Izuku stared. I'm sorry, what? At his tone, Todoroki frowned, perplexed. Are you? Izuku breathed out, and watched as the boy towering over him glared down at him as minutes ticked by and he still hadn't given the boy an answer. Opening his mouth, he shook his head. That's not it at all. He spluttered. That's how I'm an ordinary kid. Stepping away, Todoroki regarded the other boy as if what he said was ridiculous. You're not a demigod? Izuku shook his head so fast, he nearly gave himself whiplash. But your quirk. Is it really that far-fetched, Todoroki-kun? Izuku sighed. Your quirk allows you to control two opposite elements. Kachan has explosive sweat, and Momo creates objects from her body. Reaching up, he tugged on his braid. I get it that my quirk seems really flashy and strong. But that's only because I made it that way. Izuku caught the other's gaze, his green eyes shining brightly, as if his quirk was activated. I wasn't born with a strong quirk, I made it a strong quirk. Because it's my power, and I'm going to use it to save everyone. Todoroki watched the other boy, as if seeing him in a whole new light, understanding a little bit more of the teen before him. And he couldn't help but admire him. Clenching his fists, he felt himself opening up to the other boy. Something he never thought he'd ever do. My father, he's obsessed with beating All Might. But he was never able to do it. He glared at a random spot on the ground. He never stopped trying, he still continues to. Breathing out, he looked at Izuku from the corner of his vision. Have you ever heard of Quirk marriages? At the sharp intake of breath, Todoroki turned his gaze away. He used his money to buy out my mother's family, so he could marry her, and create a powerful child. He created me, to achieve his goal and beat All Might. To become the #1 hero. Todoroki swept his gaze over the boy, watching to see if he was still listening. My mother, all my memories of her crying. She called my left side, his side, unbearable before she poured boiling water over it. He locked gazes with Izuku. Midoriya, I think out of my classmates, you're the one my father would categorize as strong. That's why, I want to beat you, in front of him without using his power. He didn't wait for a response, he's not even sure he wanted one, but Izuku wasn't one to let things go just like that. Todoroki-kun, said boy paused at his name. I'm going to give it my all, you should too. Saying nothing, the dual user left. Izuku balled his fists and watched him leave. Unbeknownst to the two, Katsuki stood against the wall, secretly listening in on their conversation. Scene change after lunch, Izuku gathered with the rest of the students as President Mike explained a few things to them about the recreational games. For the most part, Izuku tuned them out as he found his thoughts circling around one of his classmates. After the conversation they had, he was admittedly a little unsettled by it all. He never thought a parent could be someone like what Todoroki described his father to be. Maybe though, he wasn't one to judge, given that his own father wasn't around in his life. But he never gave it any thought, and his mother never talked about him. It was as if he was never there. But he never questioned it, not until now, where he wondered if his father was anything like Todoroki's, or if he was different. Thoughts like those circled around his head, but only one stood out the most. What kind of person was Hisashi Midoriya? He was drawn out of his thoughts, by the crack of a whip. All right, you lot, Midnight voiced. I want you all to draw lots, to see who will be facing in the final round. She cracks her whip again. This round will be a one-on-one fighting competition, so line up, she shouted, then smirked as they scrambled to do as told. As they all shuffled along to draw lots, Izuku noticed one of his classmates stood off to the side. Raising his hand, Ojiro withdrew from the competition. EHHHHHHHH. You can't. You've worked so hard, why would you drop out now? Ojiro-kun. I'm sorry everyone, he says. But, for some reason, I can't remember clearly what happened in the last battle. I only remember up to the last bit, but everything else is a blur. Clenching his fist, he sends a harsh glare to a familiar purple-haired boy. It doesn't feel right to me, to proceed without knowing how I've reached this far. TCH, Shinso scoffed. Before Ojiro could say something, another student also withdraws from the competition with the same reasoning. Midnight regards the two boys. Oh, such passionate youths. Her whole demeanor shifts, as he coos as the two. I'll allow it. Some of the other teachers facepalmed. Now however, there were two empty slots that needed to be filled. It was decided Team Tetsu would fill in the spot. Now that's all settled, it's time to see who you all will be facing for the first round. She turned, and cracked her whip towards the screen and the matchups came up. Izuku Midoriya vs Shoto Todoroki Honta Siro vs Hitoshi Shinso. Abara Shiozaki vs Denki Kaminari Mina Ishido vs Momo Yaoyorozu. Fumikage Tokiyami vs Katsuki Bakugo Ejiro Kirishima vs Tetsu Ochako Uraraka vs Yuga Aoyama. Tenya Iida vs Mei Hatsume. It was just his luck that his match was up first, and it had to be with Todoroki. Chancing a glance towards his opponent, he watched as the other stared down at his clenched fist. As if sensing his eyes upon him, Todoroki looked up and caught his gaze. Izuku held his breath, and Todoroki watched him coolly. Then he was turning away, and Izuku found he could breathe normally again. Turning away, he made his way over to his bickering group. They were always seen together these days, they might as well be a group. Oi, Pikachu bastard. Don't you dare lose after Deku had to go out of his way to train your lousy ass. Oh, Kaminari smirked. Is that your way of wishing me luck, bro? You're a lot more friendly than I thought? What was that? Growling, Katsuki grabbed the other boy in a headlock. Say something smart again, dare ya. Uncle. Izuku snickered at their antics. Beside him, Ajiro gave him a light nudge. Hey, I know you probably don't need it and all, since you're awesome and stuff. The redhead rubbed the back of his neck, a light flush settling on his cheeks. But good luck out there, Izuku. I'm rooting for ya. Izuku felt his whole body flush at his friend's words, and he squeaked. Why you too? He spluttered. I mean, you're awesome. No, wait. That's not that you're not. I mean, Izuku groaned, and Ajiro laughed. Shut up. Sorry, Ajiro grinned. That was pretty cute. As soon as the words left his mouth, they both stiffened. Ajiro-kun. I gotta go. Wait. Izuku blinked as his friend scrambled away. Ajiro just called me. See cute. Oi, Deku. Huh? Looking up, Izuku noticed the two blondes watching him curiously. Shouldn't you go get ready for your match, idiot? You're right. Excuse me. And much like his friend did previously, Izuku quickly scrambled away. Time skip. It wasn't long till suddenly the match was upon them. After the recreational games and Cementos building the fighting arena, the finals were finally beginning. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we give you the first match of the UA Sports Festival. Present Mike's voice boomed. The one who has been leading in first place from the very beginning, with a quirk as shifting as the tides, Izuku Midoriya. The crowd cheers as he makes his way onto the arena. And his opponent, the one who has been one step behind him for the entire festival, the half-hot half-cold user, Shoto Todoroki. More cheering ensued as Todoroki made his way onto the arena, standing across from him. These two have been trying to one-up the other, and now it all boils down to this. Who will be the winner of this clash? Begin. Almost immediately, Todoroki sends a huge ice prison towards Izuku, who flinches back at the massive size of it all. He briefly thinks back to Aizawa's words at the apprehension test, but that moment of hesitation was all it took for him to be caught up in the freezing wave. And Todoroki wastes no time. Is Midoriya okay? From her spot, Midnight angles her head towards where Izuku would be frozen, only to blink as the boy thaws himself out and faces Todoroki once more. Midoriya is fine. Erase her head. You have some scary kids. Not willing to give him a moment to breathe, Todoroki quickly closes the distance between them, intending to instead physically throw Izuku out of bounds. Izuku let him. The moment the dual user grabbed Izuku's arm, he was zapped from the physical contact and pushed back. Wringing his hands, Todoroki glared. But he wasn't finished, and with a quick sweep of his arms skywards, he sent a gust of wind towards his opponent, which knocked him off his feet and pushed him to the edge of the arena. With some quick thinking on his part, Todoroki managed to save himself by placing an ice wall behind him. Getting back to his feet, Todoroki retaliated with wave after wave of ice, but they were all blocked by the cyclone that ferociously swirled around Izuku, blocking all outside attacks. Growling, he ran forward once more to attack Izuku head-on. When he reached close enough, he raised his palm toward Izuku and watched as his eyes widen, already guessing at what he was about to do. Izuku quickly picked up the wind speed and power, just as Todoroki sent another huge blast of ice his way at point blank. Dredging up all his power, he summoned the most powerful winds he could, and the two opposing forces collided head-on, pushing both boys a few ways back. Amazing! The crowd leaned forward in their seats, cheering them on to do their best. Their classmates watched them with bated breaths, concerned and excited for them. Coughing, the two got to their feet and glared at the other. Looking over his form, Izuku noticed how Todoroki was shivering as the ice crawled over his body. He came to a realization then, and frowned. Didn't you say you were going to give it your all? Todoroki froze up. Izuku shot off towards him, the wind allowing him to cross the distance easily, allowing him to land a solid punch across his opponent's cheek. Use your power, Todoroki. Dual-colored eyes snapped open, and shifting his momentum he grabbed Izuku's outstretched hand and shoulder tossed him right onto the ground, knocking the air out of him. I told you, I'll beat you without using his power. Pushing up on his arms, Izuku fell into a handstand and kicked the other boy under his chin with a blast of wind adding to the impact and propelling him skyward. It's your power, isn't it? Todoroki's breath hitched, and the memory of their earlier conversation played back in his mind. Because it's my power, and I'm going to use it to save everyone. Clenching his fist, he felt that same feeling of admiration swirl through him, and he understood. It's my power. Twisting his body in midair, Todoroki glared down at Izuku with a smirk. He promised he'd give it his all after all. Pushing his palm out, he sent a stream of flames down at his opponent. Upon landing, he watched as the flames swirled and then dissipated. But that was all right, it was meant to be a distraction anyways. With both his sides activated, he attacked Izuku once more, letting both his elements shoot out towards him. Izuku felt the familiar crackle of energy in his hand as he watched the elements cut their way across the field and head straight for him. Raising his hands, he grinned. The telltale sparks firing off his hands. Cementos, Midnight shouted. And he let it go. To be continued. Biwahahaha. Quickly runs off *PS read the fight, while listening to Fairy Tale Scarlet Warriors. D until then, plus Ultra.